There are some artifacts that archaeologists dig up, dust off, and proudly put in a museum. And then there are the ones they quietly lock away or bury or just stop talking about altogether. Today we're looking at 10 more ancient objects experts warned people not to study. Some of these are too fragile to touch, some are in places too dangerous to excavate, and some, honestly, I think they just don't want us to know what they find. This is a tiny remote island in northern Russia, and scattered across it are 14 stone labyrinths. These aren't small garden mazes. Some are over 40 feet across, made of carefully placed boulders arranged in perfect spirals. They're estimated to be up to 3,000 years old, and nobody, absolutely nobody, knows who built them or why. The local tradition, you don't enter them. They're considered thresholds to the underworld, places where spirits dwell. And here's the thing, archaeologists can't even agree on what they were used for. Some say ritual, some say fish traps, which makes absolutely zero sense, some say portals. What I do know is that people still visit the island today and come back with stories about feeling watched while walking the spirals. Take from that what you will. In 1961, 3 rock hunters were out in the mountains of California when they found a geode, a round, crystal-lined rock that takes hundreds of thousands of years to form. They cut it open, and inside was a spark plug, a 1920s champion spark plug, encased in rock that a geologist estimated was 500,000 years old. Now look, I know, the obvious answer here is that the geologist was wrong, or the rock wasn't as old as they thought, or it wasn't a real geode. But the people who found it, they weren't conspiracy theorists, they were just guys looking for rocks, and the artifact has never been properly debunked to the satisfaction of everyone. The spark plug still exists, you can see it, and the question remains, how does a piece of 20th century technology end up inside a rock that was supposedly formed 500,000 years before humans walked the earth? I don't know. I genuinely don't know, and that's the kind of thing that keeps me up. In 1933, a Mexican archaeologist named Jose Garcia Payan was excavating a burial site near Toluca, Mexico. He dug through 3 intact pyramid floors, sealed, undisturbed layers, and found a burial offering. Inside it was a small terracotta head. And here's the problem. It doesn't look Mesoamerican. It looks Roman. Bearded, European features, Roman-style hair, found in a tomb that predates Columbus by, well, a while. If this head is authentic, and it was found beneath 3 sealed floors, so something would have had to go very wrong for it to be planted, it means Romans or someone from the Mediterranean reached the Americas over 1,000 years before anyone was supposed to be here. Mainstream archaeology has largely dismissed it. The suggestion that it was planted by a jealous colleague has been floated, but the artifact is real. The burial was sealed, and nobody's come up with a satisfactory explanation that doesn't involve rewriting history. If you thought a Roman head in Mexico was weird, wait until you hear this one. Near a lake in Bolivia, a massive stone bowl was discovered in the 1950s. It's covered in carvings. On one side, typical Andean imagery, animals, human figures. On the other side is Sumerian cuneiform, writing from ancient Mesopotamia, on a bowl found in South America. And it gets stranger because the cuneiform was actually translated. The inscriptions are apparently a prayer to a Sumerian goddess in a language that shouldn't exist anywhere near the Andes. The academic community has mostly refused to engage with this artifact. It's been called a hoax, a misinterpretation, a weird coincidence, but nobody's been able to explain how or why a fake would have authentic Sumerian script that can actually be read. And the bowl just sits there in a museum in Bolivia, largely ignored by the people who should be most interested. Isn't history fun? In 1992, a villager in China's Zhejiang province drained what he thought was a pond. It wasn't a pond, it was actually the entrance to a massive underground complex. 24 chambers carved entirely by human hands, covering over 30,000 square meters. These aren't natural caves. Every wall, ceiling, and pillar has precise, uniform chisel marks, 60-degree angles, evenly spaced, running parallel across the entire surface. Here is what makes this genuinely baffling. There is no record of who built these. None. China has 3,000 years of meticulous written history, and nobody thought to mention 24 massive underground chambers? No tools were found, no construction debris, not a single artifact that explains who did this or why. The caves are open to visitors now, but the sheer scale of the mystery and the fact that we still have no answers after 3 decades of study has led some researchers to suggest that maybe we shouldn't be opening every chamber just yet. There are things underground that were hidden for a reason, I'm just saying. This is often called the oldest known star map in the world, a bronze disc inlaid with gold showing the sun, the moon, and the Pleiades star cluster. It is 3,600 years old, and it was discovered by treasure hunters with metal detectors, who then sold it on the black market, who were then caught in a police sting operation in a Swiss hotel. So right from the start, this whole discovery is a mess. And because of that, the Nebra sky disk has been at the center of a brutal academic war for years. In Denisova Cave, southern Siberia, researchers have been piecing together evidence of a species of human nobody knew existed until 2010. The Denisovans, from 40,000 years ago. We have almost nothing physical. A few teeth, finger bone, a jaw fragment. What we do have, though, is a bracelet. Green chlorite stone polished to a near mirror finish. And inside the central hole, which is perfectly round, there's evidence of high-speed rotary drilling, a technique that wasn't supposed to exist for another 30,000 years. The team that first published on it noted the workmanship was, and I'm quoting here, consistent with 21st century technology. Now, that's not an explanation. That's just a very careful scientific way of saying they don't have an explanation. More than 130 of these have been found across Europe. Small, hollow bronze objects, 12-sided, with circular holes of varying sizes in each face and a tiny sphere at each corner. They date to roughly the 1st through 5th centuries AD, found at Roman-era sites across France, Germany, Switzerland, Hungary, and Britain. Here's what's actually unsettling about them. Not a single Roman text mentions them. Nothing. In all of classical Roman literature, engineering manuals, census records, military dispatches, private letters, there is not one reference to what these things were. They've never been found in Rome itself, only in the provincial north. Over 50 competing theories have been proposed, but none have achieved consensus. The silence in the historical record isn't a gap. It looks more like a choice. Whether you believe it or not, that's pretty bizarre. In 1986, construction workers in Sichuan province, China, accidentally broke through the ground into 2 massive ritual pits nobody knew existed. Inside were bronze masks, gold objects, and ivory belonging to a Bronze Age civilization not recorded anywhere in Chinese history. The Sangshidu culture, around 3,000 to 4,000 years old. The faces on the masks don't look like anything in known Chinese archaeology. Huge eyes with pupils extended on bronze stalks, some projecting nearly 16 centimeters out of the face. Enormous wing-like ears. No connection to the mythology of any neighboring civilization. In 2021, 4 more pits were discovered and formally rewrote China's Bronze Age history. The Chinese government has tightly restricted independent research at the site from the beginning. What the masks represent, what ritual they were a part of, and what happened to this civilization is officially undetermined. Around 7,000 years ago, a civilization we call the Ubaid culture existed in what is now southern Iraq. They built the first temples in Mesopotamia. They laid the foundations for what eventually became Sumer and Babylon. Across multiple excavation sites from this period, archaeologists have found figurines. Humanoid, but with features that don't look human. elongated heads, almond-shaped eyes, long, narrow snouts, some with tails, some appearing to nurse infants. The design is consistent across separate sites, which rules out one artist's style or regional tradition. Mainstream archaeology's explanation is that these represent a deity. No tablet has been found to confirm that, no ritual context, no inscription describing what they are. We just know that the people who built the first cities in human history made these figures consistently, and nobody has ever fully explained why. I mean, I don't know, that's just kind of nuts. The Corlech head, a three-faced carved stone idol found near Corlech Hill in County Cavan, Ireland, dating to around the 1st or 2nd century AD. Three faces, each staring in a different direction, found in a region with centuries of dark folklore attached to it. To the ancient Celts, the head was the seat of the soul. Carved heads like this weren't decorative, they were considered inhabited. But here's the thing, somewhere between the 10th and 13th centuries, the communities living near this specific object buried it deliberately. Scholars believe they buried it because they believed it was cursed and needed to be put into the ground. It's now at the National Museum of Ireland. The modern legend surrounding it is unverifiable, but the burying? Well, I mean, that's documented. The people who lived alongside this thing for centuries made a decision. What they knew that we don't, well, that's the part that gets pretty unsettling. Deep in a network of tunnels beneath the desert at Saqqara, Egypt, there are 24 massive granite boxes. Each one weighs between 70 and 100 tons, each carved from a single block of Aswan granite. The lids alone weigh up to 27 tons, and they were found, all of them, completely empty. No mummies, no remains, no residue, most without a single inscription. The debate around them is actually where it gets interesting. Engineers who've measured the interior surfaces claim the flatness is beyond what hand tools should be able to produce. Egyptologists say the precision claims are overstated. Both groups have been making the same argument for 30 years and neither has fully settled it. Now, those tunnels are so narrow that getting the boxes in would have required engineering that nobody has replicated. The official position is that there's nothing left to find. That might be right, or it might just be the most convenient possible position to take. One camp says it's authentic, a Bronze Age masterpiece. The other camp says it's 1,000 years younger than claimed, or possibly just a complete forgery. Both sides have published papers calling each other wrong. There have been lawsuits, there have been accusations of research manipulation, and through all of this, the disc just sits there, behind glass, one of Germany's most prized cultural treasures. But here's the thing, if it is real, it rewrites what we know about Bronze Age astronomy. If it's fake, it's one of the most elaborate archaeological frauds in history, and the fighting over it has gotten so ugly that some people in the field quietly wish the treasure hunters had never dug it up at all. I'm just saying, if I found an ancient artifact with my little beep beep metal detector, I'm not selling it on the black market, okay? I'm gonna become an archaeologist. This is my one shot. Scattered across the hills of northern Laos are thousands of massive stone jars. Some of them are over 10 feet tall. So when I say massive, I mean massive. Some weigh several tons. They're believed to be part of an ancient burial practice dating back to the Iron Age. But here's the thing, you can't just walk up and study them because this region is still full of unexploded bombs. I bet you weren't expecting me to say that. Between 1964 and 1973, the United States dropped over 270 million cluster bombs on Laos, making it the most heavily bombed country per capita in human history. And tens of millions of those bombs never detonated. They are still there in the ground around the jars. So archaeologists who want to study this site have to work with bomb disposal teams. Every step is calculated. Every new excavation risks finding a jar or triggering a decades-old explosive. What a fun game. The Plain of Jars is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the most dangerous archaeological landscapes on the planet. The warning here isn't ancient. It's modern and it's still very, very real. In 1993, archaeologists excavating a Neolithic lake settlement in northern Greece pulled a wooden tablet out of the mud. It was covered in linear markings, symbols carved into the wood, and when they radiocarbon dated it, the results came back at roughly 5,260 BC. That makes this tablet potentially the oldest known example of writing in Europe, thousands of years older than the earliest Mesopotamian writing systems. So why haven't you heard of it? Because the tablet cannot be exposed to air. The moment it's removed from the anaerobic conditions of the lake bed, it begins to deteriorate. It has to be kept submerged, which means studying it is nearly impossible without potentially destroying it. There is writing on this tablet, we know that much, but what it says, what knowledge a 7,000-year-old European civilization chose to preserve, remains locked in wood that would crumble if we tried to read it. And that, to me, is one of the most frustrating mysteries in all of archaeology. But I'm glad we're leaving it there, okay? I'm glad we are protecting it. This is a 5,000-year-old underground temple in Malta, carved entirely from solid rock 3 levels deep. It was discovered accidentally in 1902 when construction workers broke through the ceiling, and what they found inside reshaped everything we thought we knew about prehistoric Malta. Over 7,000 bodies were buried here, and a portion of the skulls recovered showed extreme elongation, not through binding, but naturally formed, which has led to decades of debate about who exactly these people were. But the most unsettling feature of the hypogeum is the oracle chamber, a small niche carved into the wall that, when you speak into it in a deep voice, amplifies the sound to echo through the entire complex. Every chamber, every level, like the entire temple was designed around this one spot. Today, only 80 people per day are allowed inside. The microclimate is tightly controlled. The wait list is months long. And honestly, after hearing about the echoes and the elongated skulls and the 7,000 bodies in the dark, maybe a limited capacity isn't the worst thing. Standing in a quiet field in southern Sweden is a 9th century granite stone covered in 700 runes. It's the longest runic inscription in the world. For centuries, scholars thought it was a memorial, a tribute to a dead son. But in 2020, a team of researchers from 3 Swedish universities proposed a completely new translation, and what they found was genuinely chilling. According to their reading, the rock runestone isn't a memorial, it's a warning. The inscription describes a coming climate catastrophe. 3 years without summer, the sky turning red, the sun being swallowed. It references a solar storm that occurred in 536 AD that turned the sky blood red and caused crops to fail across the northern hemisphere. And the author of this stone seems to have believed it was coming again, that the end of the world was already in motion. The Vikings, the people we think of as fearless warriors, were apparently so terrified of an impending climate apocalypse that they carved a 700 rune warning into a 5-ton stone. And now, 1,200 years later, we're reading it in our own era of red skies and failing crops. I don't know, guys. Maybe some warnings aren't meant for their time. Maybe they're meant for the people who dig them up later. In 1887, a farmer in West Dunbartonshire, Scotland, uncovered a massive flat rock embedded in the earth. Roughly 13 meters by 8 meters, about the size of 3 tennis courts, covered in 90 carved symbols, cup and ring marks, spirals, geometric patterns, dating to around 3000 BC. Older than Stonehenge, the largest Bronze Age carved rock in Scotland. In spring 1965, a team of professional archaeologists came to the site, made detailed records, and then buried it, deliberately, under a meter of soil. No public consultation, no warning to the local community. The official reason given was protection from vandalism. It stayed buried for 51 years until 2016, when researchers from the University of Glasgow briefly uncovered it to do a digital scan. Then they also reburied it. It is still down there now. Nobody has said when or whether it will be fully excavated. Protection from vandalism. That's what's on record. Well, I would love to believe that's the whole story, but I don't. In 2011, the Supreme Court of India ordered the inventory of all vaults beneath the Sri Padmanabhaswamy temple. 5 vaults were opened: gold statues, gem-encrusted crowns, thousands of gold coins. The total estimated value has been placed between 22 billion and 1 trillion US dollars, making it the richest known religious institution on Earth. Vault B was not opened. The royal family obtained a Supreme Court injunction specifically to prevent it. The vault door is carved with 2 massive cobras. No handles, no hinges, no visible locking mechanism. Local tradition holds it was sealed using a sound-based ritual whose reversal, if it ever existed, is no longer known. The committee appointed by the Supreme Court, using, and I'm quoting, all possible technological resources, could not open it. The BBC reported in 2011 that the court ruled it should simply just remain shut. A modern court, with full legal authority, decided an ancient sealed room should stay that way. The official reason is religious significance, but here's the thing. They had every legal right to open it and walked away. It could be a total respect for tradition, but that's definitely an unusual thing for a court to decide. When Howard Carter opened King Tut's tomb in 1922, among the gold and the furniture were 2 trumpets, 1 bronze, 1 silver, the oldest playable instruments ever found, silent for over 3,000 years. In April 1939, a BBC researcher named James Tappern played one of them live on radio, heard by an estimated 150 million people. The first time those notes had been heard since ancient Egypt. Within weeks, a fire broke out at the Cairo Museum. Shortly after, Britain declared war on Germany. Egyptian scholars explicitly warned the trumpets should never be played again. They are now kept under strict handling protocols. In 2011, during Egypt's political revolution, reports surfaced that a visiting official played them at the museum. Power cuts inside the building followed, chaos outside. Egyptologists declined to comment on any connection, but I'd say it's pretty unsettling to say the least. Timur the Great, one of the most feared conquerors in history. His campaigns were responsible for an estimated 17 million deaths, roughly 5% of the world population at the time. Buried in the Gur-i-Amir mausoleum in Samarkand in 1405, and inside the tomb, an inscription: "Whomever opens my tomb shall unleash an invader more terrible than I." Soviet archaeologists opened it on June 19th and 20th, 1941. 3 days later, June 22nd, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa. 3 million troops, the largest military land invasion in human history. The invasion had been in planning for months. Coincidence is the obvious answer, but here's the thing. Stalin himself apparently didn't find it quite so straightforward. He ordered Timur's remains returned in November 1942 with full Islamic burial rites, the month after the Battle of Stalingrad, generally considered the turning point of the war. Could be coincidence, could be that Stalin was being politically careful with Soviet Muslim populations. Both are reasonable, but a man who publicly dismantled the church, who didn't believe in curses, quietly putting him back in the ground, and nobody officially connects those two things. I don't know. Are they meddling with things bigger than they're letting on? Well, I guess in this case, they already had.
Thule papyrus is a mysterious artifact that some believe could document an ancient encounter with extraterrestrial beings. The story begins in 1933 when Alberto Thule, a curator at the Vatican Museums, discovered a roll of papyrus in Cairo. This document supposedly dates back to the reign of Thutmose III, around 1480 BCE. After Thule's death, the scroll suspiciously vanished. Years later, Italian Egyptologist Boris de Rachowiltz claimed to have found a transcription of the Thule papyrus, and according to his translation, the text describes a bizarre event. On a winter day, a disc appeared in the sky, approximately 164 feet long and 16.5 feet wide. The disc reportedly emitted a foul odor and had no visible head. As it approached, people were so shocked that they hit themselves in confusion. Then more discs appeared, shining brighter than the sun, followed by fish raining down from the sky. Pharaoh ordered incense offering to calm the Egyptian god of Amun-Ra and mandated that the occurrence be recorded for posterity. The Ica stones, which come from the Ica province in Peru, are made up of a type of volcanic rock. They vary widely in size. There's small palm-sized pieces to massive boulders over 1.5 feet across. What's interesting about these stones is what's carved on them. They seem to depict an unknown ancient civilization with astonishingly advanced technology. The figures are shown in scenes with all this complex technology and medical practices. Some stones depict surgeries like heart and brain operations, C-sections, organ transplants. There's also images that suggest knowledge of astronomy, with figures looking at the stars through telescopes, and carvings of flying machines and spaceships, or at least what looks a lot like them. So how could a civilization capable of such advanced technology have existed so long ago, and how is there no physical evidence of them outside of the images carved on these stones? No ruins, no artifacts, no remains have surfaced to support the existence of this society. So are these genuine relics of a long-lost civilization, or are they just hoaxes? The Drapa stones are a series of mysterious artifacts that some claim are around 12,000 years old. These granite discs are said to feature inscribed markings that tell the story of an extraterrestrial crash landing on Earth. According to the legend, in 1937 an archaeological expedition in the Bayanhar Mountains in China, led by researcher Chi Pute, discovered 716 of these discs, along with the remains of beings with thin bodies and large heads. The story goes that after years of study at the Academy of Prehistory in Beijing, Chinese archaeologists managed to translate the markings. They said that the discs were created by extraterrestrial beings following a crash. Their research was published in an academic journal by one of the archaeologists named Su Nui, but the findings were highly criticized, and Nui was met with so much ridicule that he eventually just left the country, starting a new life in Japan, where he died shortly after. The Drapa stones are said to measure about 1 foot in diameter and feature 2 grooves that form a double spiral around a central hole. The hieroglyph-like symbols are claimed to be visible only with a magnifying glass. Now, for a long time they were forgotten, but in 1966 the story of the stones resurfaced when a Soviet journalist with a name I cannot pronounce published an article claiming that the discs contained metals like cobalt and acted as electrical conductors, even producing a humming sound when placed on a special turntable. Till this day, though, we don't know where the stones are or if they really did exist. The Wandjina are figures in Aboriginal Australian culture known as cloud and rain spirits. You can find their rock art in the Kimberley region of Western Australia, with some paintings dating back around 4,000 years. According to local legends, the Wandjina came to Earth to create, teach, and guide the Aboriginal people. Eventually they disappeared, with stories saying some went underground while others returned to the sky, appearing as moving lights at night. What's really interesting is how the Wandjina are depicted in the artwork. They're drawn with big eyes and light skin, which looks very similar to the classic gray alien images many describe in modern UFO encounters. So it makes you wonder, were these ancient spirits inspired by actual alien encounters? Dagu statues are these little figures from Japan's Jomon period, dating back to around 14,000 to 400 BCE. The humanoid and animal statues have these exaggerated features, especially when it comes to their big eyes and tiny mouths. Yes, very alien-like. Some researchers think these statues were used in rituals or as talismans, maybe even a way to ward off negative spirits or energy. Others think they may be these ancient people's depictions of creatures they actually encountered, beings that may have visited from above. Thanks to Eric von Daniken's book Chariots of the Gods, which posits that ancient cultures had contact with aliens, the Dagu have become pretty well known in the world of ancient alien conspiracy theories. A lot of these statues do kinda look like depictions of ancient astronauts clad in spacesuits, and who wouldn't want to believe that our ancestors encountered alien beings? It's just a cool idea. But I digress. This mask is one of the first real attempts humans made to capture a face in 3 dimensions. No one really knows what it was for. Maybe it was part of a statue in a temple, maybe it was used in rituals. It survived thousands of years though, was stolen in 2003, but thankfully later resurfaced. Way back 7,000 to 8,000 years ago in northern China, at an archaeological site called Baifudi, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, people were making some of the very first carved masks. These masks were made made of clay and shaped like humans and animals. Cats, pigs, monkeys. Some had noses and mouths sticking out and holes for the eyes so you could actually wear them. Archaeologists found them near platforms in what looked like small altars, which makes them think these masks were used in rituals or ceremonies. Maybe they were trying to talk to spirits. Maybe they were part of a performance or a festival. No one knows for sure. Kinda eerie picturing someone back then holding one of these masks, or let alone wearing it. You imagine a tiny clay pig face staring at you while everyone dances around a fire? I mean, that's just a weekend out camping for me, but placing myself thousands of years ago at this mysterious time in history, it'd be pretty creepy. Between 800 and 1600 CE, people in what's now the southeastern United States made tiny masks out of bone, copper, and shells. Archaeologists call them long-nosed god maskettes. They were small enough to be worn as earrings, but their designs are anything but simple. Each one has a long, pointy nose, big round eyes, and sometimes other details that make them look kinda eerie. They look a bit like mini plague doctor masks. They were part of the Mississippian culture, which had a lot of ceremonies and rituals, but nobody really knows what the masks were for. Some think they represented a mythical hero called Redhorn. Others think they might have been worn in ceremonies to connect with spirits or show power. The masks are usually found in burials though, which just makes them even creepier. Deep in the jungles of Belize, there's a Maya temple called Lamani, and on it sits a giant limestone face that's about 13 feet tall. It looks almost alive staring out from the temple wall. Nobody really knows why the Maya built this massive thing. Was it just decoration? Was there a deeper meaning behind it? Probably, but your guess is as good as mine. Unless you're an archaeologist, in which case your guess is better. I mean, with the Maya though, it feels like there's always more going on than meets the eye. The face is super symmetrical, which fits the Maya obsession with balance and design, but the huge scale makes it feel kinda eerie, like it's watching those who come near. The temple is buried under thick jungle too, so for a long time people didn't even know this was there. Standing in front of it now, it's impossible not to feel a little tiny and out of place. So I've heard, I've never been there. An ancient mask has finally come home to Mexico after a crazy 64-year journey. The Olmec Cave mask is massive, 2,000 pounds, depicting a jaguar god with huge oval eyes, flaring nostrils, and a gaping mouth. Authorities only figured out it had been looted in May of 2024 after decades of confusion, and a joint investigation by Manhattan prosecutors and Homeland Security finally tracked it down. The people who stole it smashed it into pieces so it could be smuggled more easily. And for almost 60 years, pieces of the mask ended up scattered in museums and private collections across the US, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art, before finally being seized from a private collector. This mask isn't just art, it's a symbol of the Olmecs, often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica. Back in 2022, archaeologists working at the Maya site of Chachcatem in Guatemala came across a jade mosaic mask buried in a looted pyramid tomb. The discovery was part of the Homel archaeological project led by Francisco Estrada Belli of Tulane University. What makes this mask so unusual is that it wasn't carved from a single block, it was pieced together from interlocking sections of jade that had to be carefully reassembled in the lab. The tomb also contained large jade plaques, ceramic artifacts, and human bones, some carved with hieroglyphs. Carbon dating placed the burial around 350 CE, during the early Classic period. Researcher Alex Tocco-Vannin helped analyze the inscriptions and found one bone that shows the buried Maya king holding the head of the very same deity represented by the mask. This deity was a manifestation of the Maya storm god, a figure tied to both power and destruction. Estrada Belli later commented, "The Maya never failed to amaze me. Now we know quite a bit more about early Maya history." Back in 1663, a Scottish preacher named Alexander Peden got himself in serious trouble for one simple reason: he would not stop preaching. King Charles II had outlawed Presbyterianism and demanded that only government-approved bishops could decide who got to be a minister. Peden ignored all that and kept holding secret sermons in houses, fields, anywhere else he could gather a crowd. That made him a wanted man. And to avoid being captured, Peden came up with a disguise that only Ed Gein would have been proud of. It was not made from skin, but it looked like something he would have made. It was a cloth mask with a fake beard, a wig, wooden teeth, and feathers stuck around the eye holes. As terrifying as he would have looked though, people still showed up for his sermons. He managed to keep it up for years, but in 1673 he was finally caught. I mean, it's kind of surprising, really. It's like this guy wearing a mask, a horrifying looking mask like that, and no one thought, hey, maybe that's Alexander Peden in disguise. Anyway, after more than a decade of prison time, banishment to America, and constant hiding, Peden eventually slipped back into Scotland, where he lived out the rest of his life in hiding. In medieval Germany, it wasn't just what you did that got you punished, it was what you wore. The upper class had the right to flaunt luxury, but if a commoner tried dressing above their means, the authorities would often come down on them. Not only could you be fined, but you'd also be humiliated in front of everyone with what was called a Schandmaske, or a shame mask. These were full metal pieces designed to mock whatever crime or minor infraction you'd been accused of. If you acted arrogant or showed off too much, you might be forced into a rooster mask. Big beak, comb, feathers, sometimes with bells that rang when you breathed so no one could ignore you. Drunks or people who didn't keep themselves clean might be stuck in a pig mask. No explanation really needed there. Gossipy women were punished with long tongue masks, once again, pretty self-explanatory. Others could be made to look like devils or snakes, branding them as untrustworthy or even evil. These masks were more of a social punishment than a physical one, but not in every case. Some versions had spikes on the inside or hot metal mouthpieces that would scar people's tongues. About 9,000 years ago, people in what's now Israel were making masks out of limestone. Archaeologists have found some of these in the desert and hills, and they're some of the oldest masks ever found. They've got these huge hollow eyes, of course, because people got to see through them. Really exaggerated features too. Researchers think the masks were used in rituals. The people who wore them were probably trying to connect with spirits or ancestors. We don't know exactly what those ceremonies look like, but the masks were clearly more than just decorations. Some of them line up with other finds in the area, like plastered human skulls, which were also most likely used in rituals. Just like with most masks today, though, these things weren't meant to be pretty. They were meant to change the face of the wearer, possibly to scare anyone looking at them. In ancient Italy, the Etruscans were making bronze masks for funerals, meant to cover the faces of the dead, basically giving them a face for the afterlife. Some of them are really detailed, realistic, others are more stylized, but in all cases, they were meant to honor the person who had died. There are legends saying that if you disturb them, spirits of the dead could get angry. People believed that messing with a burial or a mask could invoke a curse. So for a lot of ancient tombs, these weren't just art pieces, they were powerful objects that connected the living with the dead. Archaeologists have found them in tombs all over Italy, sometimes with entire burial chambers filled with bronze items. The Etruscans clearly put a lot of effort into their funerary rituals, and these masks were a central part of it. So for that reason, they're said to have this eerie weight about them. In 1876, an archaeologist named Heinrich Schliemann was digging at Mycenae when he pulled up a gold mask he claimed was the face of King Agamemnon, a Mycenaean king who, according to Greek myths, led the Greek forces into the Trojan War. It's a full funeral mask made from gold. It fits right over the skull. Schliemann called it the Mask of Agamemnon, and suddenly everyone was talking about it. But almost immediately, other archaeologists started questioning this. Some said it looked a little too perfect, too fancy to be from that era. Was Schliemann exaggerating, faking it maybe? The controversy has never really gone away. People still argue about whether it actually belonged to the legendary king or if it was just another wealthy Mycenaean. Can't say for sure, of course, but this was almost definitely a funerary mask, meant to cover the face of someone important during burial. Even though we'll probably never know if it's really Agamemnon, the mask has become legendary on its own. It's one of the earliest and most famous funerary masks from Europe. If you go up into the high plains of western Bolivia, right near the Sajama volcano, the ground is covered in a giant web of perfectly straight lines. They cover over 8,000 square miles, making it easily one of the largest archaeological sites on the planet. Unlike the Nazca lines in Peru that show pictures of monkeys and spiders, these are just straight lines. They're basically paths anywhere from 3 to 10 feet wide, and they cut right through hills and brush. Some of these lines run for 12 miles straight without bending a single time. The local people made them thousands of years ago by scraping away the dark surface rocks and soil to show the lighter dirt underneath. Doing that over miles of rugged, uneven mountains without any modern mapping tools, that's a crazy amount of work. Archaeologists think people walked these lines as holy paths to visit different shrines and burial towers scattered around the desert, but nobody knows for sure why they needed to build them on such a massive scale like this. Right behind the famous Temple of Seti I in Abydos, Egypt, there's a giant pit in the ground. Inside that pit is a structure called the Osirion. It looks completely out of place compared to the regular Egyptian temples around it. Most temples in Egypt have thin walls covered in colorful carvings and hieroglyphs. The Osirion doesn't have any of that. It's made of giant plain granite pillars that don't have any decorations at all. Some of these blocks weigh up to 100 tons though. The builders intentionally put the structure over a natural underground spring, so the center of it sits like an island surrounded by deep water. Because the groundwater keeps rising, the floor has been flooded for thousands of years. Historians say it was built around 1300 BCE as a tomb for the god Osiris, but because it sits so much lower than the main temple and uses a totally different building style, a lot of researchers think it's actually a remnant of a much older building that the later Egyptians just dug up and built around. Next up, we have a stone slab covered in etchings, which sits in a grassy park right next to a housing development in Scotland. Underneath the grass is a massive stone slab, about 42 feet long and 26 feet wide. It's called the Cockno Stone. It's covered in some of the weirdest prehistoric carvings in Europe. Neolithic people carved these shapes about 5,000 years ago. The whole surface is just packed with over 100 symbols, mostly circles inside other circles with long lines cutting through them. Some of the shapes even look like footprints, but with 4 toes. Archaeologists aren't exactly sure what this thing is. Some people think it's an ancient star map for tracking constellations. Others think it's just religious art. It caused a lot of arguments, and there were such big crowds coming here to check it out that the government actually buried the whole stone in dirt back in 1965 to keep people from ruining it. Yeah, because hooligans were coming around messing with it. It dug it up for a quick 3D scan in 2016, but right now it's still sitting completely hidden underground again. Over in West Java, Indonesia, there's a big hill covered in shattered volcanic stone columns. For a long time, everyone just assumed it was a natural mountain with a few old stone terraces built on top. But geologists started testing the hill, and now there's a debate over whether the entire mountain is actually a giant buried pyramid. Scientists used ground-penetrating radar and drilled holes deep into the hill. They found out the inside isn't just natural dirt and rock. The hill is actually built in layers. The top terraces are only a few thousand years old, but underneath that, the scans show big hidden chambers and stacked volcanic rocks going down 90 feet. They even pulled up old organic material from the bottom layers that dated back over 10,000 years, which would make it way older than the pyramids in Egypt. And researchers on site say the stones are packed together with an ancient type of mortar. Could mean some ancient civilization was building massive structures back when most of our ancestors were just hunting and gathering. That's what Indonesian geologist Danny Hilman Natuwijaya thinks. He believes the site was built as this giant pyramid 9,000 to 20,000 years ago. Deep in the bamboo forests of Asuka, Japan, there's a big piece of carved granite sitting on a hill. It's called the Masada no Awafune, which means the rock ship of Masada. The thing is huge. It's about 36 feet long, 26 feet wide, and 15 feet high. It weighs around 800 tons. And it's shaped really weird, as you can see. The top of the rock was flattened almost completely straight, and someone cut 2 perfectly square holes right into the middle. There's a bit of a stone ridge separating the 2 holes, and then around the bottom sides of the rock, there's a grid pattern of crisscross grooves chiseled into the granite. Archaeologists don't really know who carved this, when they did it, or why. Some think it was an old astronomical tool, because the center ridge lines up with a specific mountain peak. Others think it was supposed to be the base of some giant tomb that someone just gave up on building, but there are 0 written records about it, so it's really a mystery. Over in eastern India, there's a mountain range with some pretty incredible stonework. They're called the Barabar Caves. They were cut directly into giant boulders over 2,000 years ago. The outside, they just look like small doors cut into big rocks, but when you walk inside, the walls and ceilings are almost polished. They're super smooth. Granite is incredibly hard, but the builders managed to flatten and buff the walls to the point where they can reflect light like a mirror. Historians know the technique as Morian polish, but they don't really know what kind of hand tools can make granite that flat and smooth inside a dark cave like this. On top of that, the shape of the rooms creates really cool acoustics. Because the walls are perfectly smooth and curved, sound gets trapped. If you say a single word, the sound waves just bounce around in a loop. Check this out. If you fly a plane over the deserts of Jordan, which I'm sure most of you do in your spare time, you can see a bunch of massive, almost perfectly stone rings stamped into the landscape. Archaeologists call them the Big Circles. There are about 12 of them scattered across Jordan, with one more sitting just north in Syria. And they're basically identical in how they were put together. These circles are huge, ranging anywhere from 700 to over 1,400 feet across. But if you were to walk up to one on the ground, you probably wouldn't even notice it. They're just low walls built out of stones piled a few feet high. Crazy part is that whoever built them managed to make them almost perfectly round without being able to see their own work from the air. A British pilot first spotted them from the sky back in 1920, but it wasn't until recently that researchers started really mapping them. Based on old Roman roads that cut right through some of the rings, we know they're at least 2,000 years old, but they could easily be much older. Back in 2003, scientists were using sonar to map the bottom of the Sea of Galilee in Israel when they came across something pretty bizarre. Sitting on the lakebed was a giant cone-shaped mound made of thousands of boulders. It stands nearly 32 feet tall and spans about 230 feet wide. Researchers estimate the whole pile weighs around 60,000 tons, heavier than most modern warships. When divers swam down to check it out, they confirmed it was definitely man-made. The rocks are natural boulders up to 3 feet long. There are no tool marks on them, but they're piled together very intentionally. It wasn't built underwater, though. They would have built it on dry land thousands of years ago, then it was submerged later on when the water levels rose. But, I mean, who went through all the trouble of moving 60,000 tons of heavy volcanic rock to this specific spot? In the desert of southern Peru, right near Lake Titicaca, you'll find a massive rock wall that's been carved into a giant mysterious shape. It's called Aramumuru, or the Gate of the Gods. It's basically a huge 23-foot square cut. It's basically a huge 23-foot square cut directly into a solid cliff face. Right in the bottom center of this giant square is a smaller niche that looks kind of like a door, standing about 6.5 feet tall. But if you walk up to it, you realize it doesn't open. It just stops at solid rock. There are no tunnels, there's no hidden chambers, no buildings behind it, so why is it there? Well, mainstream archaeologists think the site was created by the Tiwanaku civilization, or maybe an even older pre-Inca culture, but because there are no organic remains left behind here, nobody can date this thing perfectly. There's some very interesting native folklore behind it, though. The Aymara people have called it the Devil's Doorway for centuries. Ancient legends say this wasn't a dead-end wall at all, but a portal used by powerful shamans to travel to different realms. Even today, the site attracts people who swear they can feel this strange vibration or hear a low buzzing sound when they press their forehead against the center of the stone door. Finally, we're going to a wheat field in a small town in Germany. It doesn't sound all that interesting, but it actually is. Back in 1991, a pilot flying overhead noticed this giant circular shadow in the crops. An archaeologist dug up the area. They realized they were looking at the oldest solar observatory on the planet. It's called the Gosek Circle. It was built roughly 7,000 years ago. The whole monument is about 220 feet wide. Originally, it was a big ditch wrapped around two giant circular fences made of thousands of heavy wooden posts. The builders left 3 specific gaps, or gates, in these fences, one facing north, one facing southeast, and one facing southwest. The alignment here is what's really interesting. If you stand right in the dead center of the circle during the winter solstice, the sun rises perfectly through the southeast gate and sets directly behind the southwest gate. It is a perfect calendar built by simple Stone Age farmers. Way before anyone thought humans knew enough about math or the sky to track the sun with this kind of precision. There's also a mystery as to what else went on in this giant wooden ring. When workers excavated the center, they didn't just find old pots, farming tools, they found a bunch of animal skulls and human bones that looked like they'd been scraped clean before they were buried. Since these people didn't leave behind any writing, we have no idea who they were, but it seems like this was a possible ritual site, a of some kind. In July of 2014, something really interesting happened in Chhattisgarh, India. The State Department of Archaeology and Culture got in touch with the Indian Space Research Organization to look into some ancient rock paintings found in caves near Charama. The paintings are thought to be around 10,000 years old, and archaeologist J.R. Bhagat was especially fascinated with them. He believes that these paintings might show that ancient humans may have been looking to the stars and wondering about life beyond our planet. Some of the paintings depict large humanoid figures coming down from the sky, and a few of them look like they're wearing helmets or something resembling antenna. There's also a disc-shaped craft with 3 legs, or maybe rays coming out from it. It's pretty hard to look at some of these pieces and not think of aliens. On top of that, there are legends of beings called the Rohilla people, or the small-sized ones, who supposedly landed in round flying objects and took people from the village, never to be seen again. Mohenjo-Daro was one of the largest settlements in the Indus Valley civilization, built around 2600 BCE in what is now Pakistan. When excavations began in 1922, when the city was rediscovered, they found skeletons scattered across the streets, many seemingly frozen in time as if they died suddenly and unexpectedly. Bodies were found intertwined, holding hands, lying unburied in the street. The question was, and still is, what caused these people to die, and why weren't they buried? On top of that, the skeletons were found to be radioactive, with levels comparable to those at Hiroshima. David Davenport, a British researcher who dedicated years to studying this site, believed that Mohenjo-Daro was annihilated by a blast similar to an atomic bomb. In his words, there was an epicenter about 50 yards wide where everything was crystallized, fused, or melted. Here's where it gets even stranger. Ancient texts like the Mahabharata describe a cataclysmic event. White hot smoke that was 1,000 times brighter than the sun reduced the city to ashes. According to Davenport, this destruction might have been tied to ancient conflicts involving aliens who could have had a hand in the fall of the city. The Vinca figurines are artifacts which were discovered in what is now Serbia, dating back around 5,500 years. They were created by the Vinca culture, known for having a pretty advanced society long before written history. And these small clay figures often depict animals and humans, or at least humanoids. Just look at these things. They're pretty strange looking. A lot of them have very unusual features. They almost look like reptilian creatures. So what are they supposed to be, and what were they used for? Well, we don't know for sure, but some believe they could represent deities or fertility symbols. Others think they may be representations of extraterrestrial beings. The Sabu disc is an ancient Egyptian artifact that dates back to around 3000 to 2800 BCE. Discovered in 1936, this disc was found in the tomb of an official named Sabu, hence the name. It's made of schist, a type of stone, and has a really unique design. For the time it was created, that is. Looking at the thing without context, you think it was just a broken off piece of wheel from some kind of machinery or something. Scrap metal. But that's exactly what makes this artifact seem so out of place. The thing looks like a steering wheel, but it's highly unlikely to be, so then what is it? Some people think it could have been some sort of ceremonial object, seeing as it was buried in Sabu's tomb. Others think it might have had some sort of practical purpose that we just don't understand. The disc's design just seems way ahead of its time. Could it be a tool that was part of a larger, advanced machine? Is it evidence of extraterrestrial technology, a gift from visitors from another world? Till this day, we still don't know. The Aiud object was discovered in Romania in 1974. It's this wedge-shaped metal piece that was discovered during construction work. First glance, it might seem pretty ordinary, but it isn't. Some have speculated that it could be of extraterrestrial origin, or just an origin we don't understand. And there are some compelling reasons for that. For one, there's the composition of the material. The wedge contains aluminum and silicon along with other metals, which is strange because aluminum wasn't really known or used until the 19th century. The thing is, the wedge of Aiud was found in sand alongside the bones of mastodons, suggesting it's much older than aluminum technology. And the patina coating the object indicated that it had been lying there for thousands of years, leading some to think it could date back to a time when ancient humans just didn't have the technology to create something like this. This has led to theories that it might have been part of an alien spacecraft, or some kind of other advanced device that they left behind. Could it be evidence of ancient aliens visiting Earth and interacting with our ancestors? Again, we just can't say for sure. There's an enormous slab of granite standing in Blekinge, Sweden. It's 13 feet tall, and it's been sitting in the same spot for over 1,300 years. So what is it? A gravestone? A war memorial? No and no. It was built for one specific reason: to carry a curse. The runes carved into it aren't regular Viking writing either. They're from an older, more ritualistic alphabet that people at the time considered far more powerful. It says the person who carved it hid runes of power inside the stone, and if you mess with it, you're gonna die, and not quickly. They're looking at a slow, treacherous, drawn-out death. There's a story from the 1400s. A farmer wanted the land cleared and decided the stone needed to come down. His plan was to pile wood around the base, heat the granite until it's hot enough, then throw cold water on it so it would crack apart. Well, on the day he tried it, with zero wind in the air, apparently, a sudden gust came out of nowhere, reversed the flames, and burned him alive. The stone didn't have a scratch on it. Well, from that point on, nobody touched the thing. The Glavendrup stone holds the record for the longest runic inscription ever found in Denmark. A woman named Ragnhild had it carved to honor her husband, Alle, who was a high-ranking priest or chieftain. The beginning of it is a tribute to him, a proper memorial, but the end of it is something else entirely. It says that anyone who damages the stone or moves it to honor somebody else will become Arger. What does that word mean? Well, to say that Arger is an insult would be a gross understatement. Calling someone Arger in Viking society could be a death sentence, either for the person being called it or the accuser. It basically meant coward. So if you were called this, especially as a man, you had legal grounds to defend your honor to the death. And if you didn't do anything about it, you could basically be demoted to a second-class citizen. Anyone could rob you, attack you, or unalive you, and no one was going to do a thing about it. By carving that word into the stone, Ragnhild was giving the entire community permission to destroy the life of anyone who disrespected this site. And it worked. The stone is still perfectly intact after all this time. The Egja stone is one of the stranger finds in Norway. When archaeologists dug it up, it was face down over a grave. The runes were on the underside, pressed against the dirt, pointing down, of course, at the body beneath it. The text describes a BLOOD sacrifice, says the stone was never exposed to sunlight and wasn't carved with a regular blade. It was carved with a ritual tool used specifically for magic. And then it tells the dead person to stay where they are, warns the living not to open the grave. Vikings had a real serious fear of draugr, and these were basically said to be zombies that kept the full intelligence of the person they used to be, and not the slow, mindless zombies that we often think of today. A draugr was smart, and more importantly, physically powerful. The belief was that if you didn't seal a grave with the right ritual, the person inside could get back out. The Egja stone may have been that seal. Placing it face down over the body was like locking a vault from the outside, a vault specifically designed to stay locked forever. The Stentoften runestone is similar to the Bjorktorp we talked about at the top. It was found in a field in Sweden and uses almost identical language: perpetual death and insidious harm to anyone who disturbs the monument. But there's an extra layer to this one. It mentions prophecy and power in a way that strongly suggests the land around it was used for cedar. Cedar was a form of Viking sorcery that most people were genuinely afraid of, not skeptical about, actually frightened by. Involved communicating with spirits, and it was considered so dangerous and strange that even hardened warriors wanted nothing to do with it. It was basically dark witchcraft. When the runestone was found in the 1800s, it was going to be moved to a church for safekeeping. A lot of people just refused to help though, not wanting whatever negative energy that was attached to it to be transferred to them. On the Danish island of Bornholm, archaeologists dug up a burial that had nothing to do with honoring the dead. The body had been brutalized after the person was already gone. Giant boulders stacked on the chest and legs, a heavy wooden stake driven straight through the torso into the ground below. Obviously, they wanted to make sure this person stayed down. As I mentioned before, the Viking fear of the dead rising from their graves was real. This particular person scared everyone so much that dying is not considered a good enough guarantee, so they crushed them with rocks and pinned them to the earth with a stake, just to feel safe at night. These got called vampire burials by modern researchers, and similar burials have been found in other parts of Europe as well. Back in 2018, looters in Hebron, right in the southern West Bank, not far from the Judean desert, dug up a 9,000-year-old stone mask. The Israel Antiquities Authority's anti-robbery unit swooped in and recovered it, and now it's at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. The thing is carved from limestone, and honestly, it's insane how lifelike it looks. You've got cheekbones and nose, even teeth carved in, made with nothing but basic tools. And there are 4 holes around it, so it could have been worn on someone's head during ceremonies or stuck on a pole for public display. The mask comes from a really important period in human history, the Neolithic, when people were starting to quit their nomadic hunting and gathering lifestyle and settle down to farm. That shift didn't just change food, it changed culture. Rituals got more complex, sacred art popped up everywhere, and ancestor worship became a big deal. Archaeologists think that masks like this were tied to those practices. What's crazy is that only about 16 masks like this are known from the area, so it's super rare. Imagine some ancient craftsman spending hours shaping a human face, polishing it, making it look real 9,000 years ago, just to use in rituals or ceremonies. Now let's travel to Libya on the Mediterranean coast, to the ancient city of Ptolemais. Archaeologists from the University of Warsaw returned to the city in 2023 after a 13-year break because of the civil war, and in June of 2024 they came across something really strange. Hidden inside a cistern of a late Roman-era house, they found a mask carved from mortar. It's a human face, but the features are minimal. Kind of eerie. Nobody knows exactly why it was there. Some think it might have been meant to ward off evil. Others say it could have had something to do with Libyan traditions. The house itself was impressive. It had a rainwater collection system. Archaeologists also found stone basins near the entrance, probably used for offerings or taxes. The mask just adds another layer of mystery. Why place a face in a cistern? Back in 1876, an archaeologist named Heinrich Schliemann was digging in Mycenae in southern Greece and found this gold mask in a tomb. It's a full human face with a beard, mustache, big ears, all hammered out of a single piece of gold. People thought it might be Agamemnon, the king of the Iliad, but the mask is probably older than the stories, so we'll probably never know for sure. What's wild is how lifelike it looks, considering it's thousands of years old. It's clearly a human face, not just, a round plate-looking thing with eye holes and a mouth carved out. There are a bunch of similar masks found in the area, but this one's become famous because it's all shiny and gold. No one knows exactly why it was made. Was it meant to honor the dead person buried there? Was it supposed to scare spirits away? Or maybe it had some ceremonial purpose. It's been sitting in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens for a while now. The idea that someone made this tiny gold face thousands of years ago and it survived all this time is pretty cool to think about. And the fact we don't know who it really belonged to makes it even stranger. In the 80s, archaeologists digging in Sichuan, China found a bunch of huge bronze masks in a place called Sangjui. Some have giant staring eyes, long ears, and crazy headpieces that make them look almost like aliens. Others are simpler but still weirdly intense. These masks are more than 3,000 years old and come from the Shu civilization, which was really good with bronze, but no one knows what these masks were actually for. Some think they were for religious ceremonies, maybe to honor gods or ancestors. Others say they could represent mythical creatures. The masks are totally different from anything else anyone has ever seen, which just makes them even more mysterious. The city they came from was a major cultural center. Every time archaeologists dig there, they find more strange stuff that doesn't fit with anything else in Chinese history. Standing in front of one of these masks, it's hard not to feel a little creeped out. They're huge, they're from thousands of years ago, plus you don't really know why they were made. Way back around 3100 BCE in a city called Uruk in what's now Iraq, someone carved a face out of white marble. It's called the Mask of Warka, and it's thought to be Inanna, the Sumerian goddess of love, war, and fertility. The face is simple, but it's so perfect and striking in that simplicity. High cheekbones, soft eyebrows, and the faintest hint of a nose. Because the nose got chipped off, who knows when. Actually, it kind of looks like an ancient version of the Michael Myers mask, which also means it sort of looks like William Shatner. The Mask of Warka, also called the Lady of Uruk, is basically the first realistic human face we've ever found from ancient times. It dates back to around 3100 BCE. It's carved from white marble, stands just over 8 inches tall. Archaeologists think it might represent the goddess Inanna, though we don't know for sure. The mask probably wasn't a standalone piece, probably part of a bigger wooden statue, with the marble covering just the exposed skin, like the face and hands. The mask was found in 1939 in the ancient city of Uruk, in a part of town called the Iana district, which was dedicated to Inanna. It stayed there for decades until 2003, when the National Museum of Iraq was looted. The mask disappeared for a long time, but the US military eventually tracked it down, buried on a farm near Baghdad. Amazingly, it was still completely intact. Sangshendui is one of the weirdest Bronze Age discoveries in China. The site sits in the Sichuan province. In 1986, archaeologists discovered 2 sacrificial pits packed with hundreds of deliberately broken or burned bronze jade and ivory objects from a previously unknown civilization called the Shu. They were around from about 1250 to 1100 BCE, then they just vanished. Earthquakes and landslides might explain it, but the total lack of human remains or records of them, it makes it super mysterious. The Shu also made masks. Some were life-sized, others the size of a small car. The craftsmanship is pretty incredible, and there's just nothing like these designs anywhere else in ancient China. And we have no written records from the civilization to help explain what these things are, or why they were smashed and buried, or of course, where that civilization went. Well, this is an eerie image. This photo was taken during the discovery of what's become known as the Gua Made Green Masks. Deep in East Java, there's this underground temple at a place called the Gua Made, which translates to Made Cave. This cave is home to some of the most mysterious artifacts ever discovered in Southeast Asia. A bunch of metal masks. Tests on brick from the temple put them somewhere in the early 1st millennium BCE, which is way before any big civilizations we know of in that part of Southeast Asia. The temple itself is cut into the bedrock about 7 meters underground. When archaeologists dug in, they found the masks, some life-sized, some smaller, plus pottery and Chinese coins, which doesn't make a lot of sense for the time. So, see, those coins and pottery are from much later, hundreds of years after these masks were created. In Bulgaria, archaeologists dug up this super strange mask that's about 6,000 years old from a settlement called Solnitsata. That place is known as Europe's oldest city because it was basically built around salt mining, which was huge back then. Salt was like gold. But the mask is what's freaking people out. It's almost alien looking. It's oddly shaped, the eyes are big, and it has no mouth. But why no mouth? This may be a shot in the dark, but some researchers have been speculating that maybe the point was that silence was sacred in some way, or it was meant to represent some kind of god that humans weren't supposed to or were not able to talk to directly. Outside of the pyramids, Tutankhamun's death mask may be the most iconic symbol of ancient Egypt. When British archaeologist Howard Carter opened the Boy King's tomb in 1923, this mask was staring back at him, untouched for over 3,000 years. Built out of solid gold, it was meant to make sure Tut's soul was properly protected in the afterlife. Lord Carnarvon, Carter's sponsor, died just months after the discovery from what started as a mosquito bite. Newspapers jumped on this, claiming Tut's spirit had caused it, and almost immediately the idea of a mummy's curse was in the mainstream. Other members of Carter's team and other visitors also died under mysterious circumstances. A man, George J. Gould, fell ill after visiting the site. Captain Richard Bethel was smothered in his sleep, and A.C. Mace died of pneumonia. The mask became a symbol of this deadly mystery, as if it were watching over anyone who got too close. Is the tomb really cursed? Well, probably not in a paranormal way, but the truth is just as scary. Tombs like Tut's have been found with a fungus that attacks the lungs and immune system. Symptoms from some of the expedition members line up with this kind of infection. Curse or not though, Tut's mask is now cemented in most of our minds as a cursed ancient artifact, a reminder that some parts of history better left alone.
Carved straight down into solid rock, the Kailasa temple looks like an entire mountain was hollowed out by hand. Located at the Ellora Caves, this temple is so remote that for centuries it sat hidden from most of the world. What makes it even stranger is how it was built. Instead of stacking stone blocks, workers carved downward into basalt rock, removing over 200,000 tons of stones using nothing more than chisels and hammers around the 8th century. The sheer scale of this effort would have taken decades, maybe even centuries, and yet there's no record of exactly how it was done. The temple is filled with intricate carvings of gods, animals, and mythological scenes that still hold their shape today. Many researchers compare their precision to modern engineering, but it was done with primitive tools. Some suggest thousands of workers labored tirelessly, while others wonder if advanced methods were lost to history. To this day, this temple remains one of the largest rock-cut temples on Earth, sitting in the middle of a rugged landscape far from major cities. 600 feet above the Sri Lankan jungle, Sigiriya is a massive rock fortress that looks like something out of a fantasy story. In the 5th century, a king built an entire palace on top of the rock, complete with gardens, frescoes, and even a mirrored wall polished so smooth that the king could see his reflection in it. Archaeologists believe the fortress was designed not just as a royal palace, but also as a defensive stronghold. Today, reaching the top still requires climbing narrow staircases that wind along cliffs with sheer drops below. From the summit, the view stretches endlessly across jungle and farmland, reinforcing how isolated the structure really is. Building something like this in such a location was a near impossible feat for the time, especially considering the resources needed to carry materials up the rock. Its placement feels intentional, almost as if it was designed to be hidden from invaders and the rest of the outside world, preserved as a fortress in the middle of nowhere. In a granite quarry outside Aswan, far from the Great Pyramids and temples, lies an unfinished obelisk, still attached to the. If completed, it would have stood nearly 100 feet tall and weighed 1,200 tons, making it the largest obelisk ever attempted. But during construction, cracks appeared in the stone and the project was abandoned. What's left behind is almost more fascinating than a finished monument. You can still see tool marks carved into the stone, offering rare clues into ancient Egyptian construction methods. Historians believe obelisks like this were meant to honor gods or commemorate pharaohs, but moving one of this size remains a mystery. Even with modern cranes, transporting a single 1,200-ton block would be a challenge. The quarry itself sits in a remote part of southern Egypt, far from the Nile's major centers of power, making this unfinished monument one of the strangest ancient relics that never left the middle of nowhere. Hidden in the hills of southeastern Zimbabwe lies a sprawling stone city that once housed up to 20,000 people. Built between the 11th and 15th centuries, Great Zimbabwe is made entirely of dry stone walls, some towering over 30 feet high and stretching for hundreds of feet without mortar. These walls were so carefully constructed that many still stand today. The city was once the heart of a powerful kingdom, rich from trade in gold and ivory, and yet its remote location still puzzles researchers. When Europeans stumbled upon the site in the 1800s, they refused to believe local Africans had built it, instead attributing it to ancient outsiders like the Phoenicians or the Arabs. It wasn't until later that archaeology proved it was indeed built by the ancestors of the Shona people. Despite that, the site still raises questions about why such a massive city was constructed in rugged terrain, far from major trade routes. To this day, Great Zimbabwe remains one of Africa's most mysterious and isolated ancient cities. Imagine an entire city built on the ocean, made of massive basalt stone stacked into artificial islands. That is Nan Madol, a ruined city off the coast of Micronesia. Nicknamed the Venice of the Pacific, it consists of nearly 100 islets connected by canals stretching across a lagoon. Built between the 12th and 17th centuries, the site required transporting stones weighing up to 50 tons each. The problem is that the people of the time had no cranes, no wheels, and no draft animals to help move such weight. To this day, no one knows exactly how the builders did it. Some theories suggest log rafts, others believe it required thousands of workers, and local legends even speak of magic. Nan Madol is so isolated that it takes hours to reach it, even with modern travel. Surrounded by ocean and thick jungle, it feels abandoned in time, one of the most mysterious monuments ever built in the middle of nowhere. Stretching for miles across the countryside of Brittany in northwestern France are over 3,000 standing stones arranged in rows, circles, and clusters. Known as the Karnak stones, they date back nearly 7,000 years, making them older than most of Europe's famous prehistoric monuments. Some of the stones weigh up to 350 tons, and no one knows exactly why they were placed in such patterns. Theories range from astronomical alignments to religious ceremonies to ancient markers for burial sites. Unlike Stonehenge, which draws millions of visitors, the Karnak stones remain scattered across farmland and forests, blending into the quiet countryside. The sheer number and scale make them one of the strangest prehistoric monuments in Europe, especially considering the builders were Neolithic people with no advanced technology. To walk among them is to feel like you've stepped into a forgotten ritual landscape left behind in the middle of nowhere. High in the Andes of Bolivia, in one of the driest and most remote regions on Earth, lies a network of perfectly straight lines etched into the ground. Known as the Sajama lines, these geoglyphs stretch across an area of more than 15,000 square miles, with some lines running up to 10 miles long. The lines are carved into the soil, some only a few inches deep, yet they have lasted for thousands of years thanks to the dry climate. Like the Nazca lines of Peru, they can only be fully appreciated from the air. Archaeologists believe they were created by indigenous people over 3,000 years ago, but their purpose is still debated. Were they ceremonial pathways used during rituals, astronomical markers to track the stars, or something else entirely? What's certain is that they exist in one of the most isolated landscapes imaginable, where the high altitude, freezing nights, and thin air make even survival difficult. Deep in the Ural Mountains of Russia, far from any cities, explorers have found massive stone blocks stacked into formations that look man-made. Some of these stones weigh hundreds of tons and appear to be cut with precision, giving the impression of ancient walls or platforms. Known as the Ural megaliths, this site has sparked heated debate. Mainstream archaeologists argue that they are natural formations shaped by erosion and geological forces, while others insist they show signs of deliberate human construction. Without large-scale excavation or detailed studies, the mystery remains unsolved. What adds to the intrigue is the isolation. The Ural Mountains are vast, cold, and rugged. On the small island of Malta, far from mainland Europe, stand temples older than the pyramids of Egypt. The Hagar Kim temples were built around 36,000 BC using massive limestone blocks, some weighing over 20 tons. The temples feature doorways, altars, and carvings that align with the summer and winter solstice, proving that their builders had advanced knowledge of astronomy. What makes them incredible is not just their age, but their location. Malta is a small island in the Mediterranean, and yet thousands of years ago, people managed to transport and arrange these stones with remarkable precision.
The rock runestone in Sweden has the longest runic inscription ever found anywhere in the world. For a long time, people assumed it was hero myths, old poetry, interesting but nothing more than that. But when researchers really looked into it, what they found was completely different. It's more of a warning. The text talks about the sun disappearing and crops dying, which is what Vikings called Fimbul Winter, brutal, endless winter that they believed would come right before Ragnarok, basically the end times. And scientists have been able to confirm that right around the time this stone was carved, there was this string of huge volcanic eruptions that went off around the world, and the temperature in Scandinavia had dropped. Yeah, even more than usual. That would have been awful. The sky darkened, crops would have failed, a massive portion of the population starved or froze to death. The people living through it genuinely believed the world was ending because, I mean, from where they were standing, kinda was. In Norway, a woman was found buried in a boat. That part is normal. Boat burials were an honorable way to go in Viking culture. What wasn't normal were the large scallop shells that had been jammed into her mouth. Nothing like this exists anywhere else in the Viking record, not even close. The shells didn't seem to be decorative, they were forced in there, and in a lot of ancient cultures, forcibly closing the mouth of a dead person usually meant they were trying to keep them quiet, or stopping the spirit from speaking, or stopping something from getting back in through the body. Because this doesn't match anything else we know from Norse culture, though, nobody's been able to fully explain it. This was either some very rare ritual, or maybe even just a single specific case. The Snølledev stone was found in Denmark, dates back to around the 800s. At first glance, it doesn't look that intense. It's just a rune stone with a short inscription saying it was raised for a man named Gunvalder, who was the son of Hraldr. Pretty standard Viking memorial, but then you notice the symbols carved into it. There's a set of 3 interlocked drinking horns, what people now call the triple horn of Odin. In Norse stories, these horns are tied to the mead of poetry, which is all about wisdom, status, and power. Probably meant the person buried here had some kind of importance. While the stone doesn't actually have a curse written on it, people often treat it like it does. That idea comes from other Viking rune stones that did include warnings, mixed with the fact that Odin really wasn't seen as a calm or forgiving god, so over time it's turned into something else. Not just a memorial, but something that feels like it carries some ominous weight. The Sullaby runestone in Sweden doesn't threaten you with death or curses or divine punishment. It goes after something that for a Viking was arguably worse. The inscription says that anyone who breaks the stone will be shunned and dishonored. One of the specific words on the stone is rata, which, similar to Arger, seemed to carry real weight. It's been translated to mean a wretch, outcast, or warlock, and not warlock in the sense that you'd gain magical powers, more that you'd be considered abnormal, a freak. To understand why this was so important, you have to understand what reputation meant in Viking society. Sure, you had an afterlife with Valhalla, but what was considered super important after you died was your name, what people said about it. Your reputation was your legacy, so being called a rata wasn't just embarrassing, it meant your name would be spoken with contempt. Not just now, but by the generations that came after. For a warrior, that kind of social death, that was the threat that actually kept them up at night. The Osberg ship burial in Norway is one of the most famous Viking discoveries ever made. Incredibly preserved, beautifully crafted, clearly the resting place of someone of very high status. And somewhere inside the structure of that ship, hidden in a spot where no one would ever see it unless they were actively taking the ship apart, someone carved 2 words into a small piece of wood. Rather than butchering the language, I'll just say the translation, man knows little. It wasn't meant to be read by mourners or visitors. It was a place and a spot that would only be reached by someone disturbing the burial, which means it was left specifically for people like, well, the archaeologists who eventually found it.
In late 2022, archaeologists excavating the Tomiyu Maruyama burial mound in Nara, Japan, found a sword that immediately looked wrong. It was an iron dako sword from the Kofun period, roughly the late 4th century, and it was around 2.3 meters long, about 7.5 feet. Too large to be a normal weapon, too awkward for actual combat. Experts believe it was likely ceremonial, possibly placed in the tomb to protect the dead from evil spirits. And that is where it gets unsettling. This was not just a sword, it was a spiritual barrier. Alongside it, archaeologists also found a massive bronze mirror, another object with ritual importance in ancient Japan. So whoever was buried here was not just given valuables, they were sealed with a giant serpent-shaped blade and a sacred mirror. Officially, that means protection, but Protection from what? When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, it destroyed Pompeii and buried nearby Herculaneum, preserving something almost impossible, an ancient Roman library. Hundreds of scrolls were carbonized by heat and turned into black, brittle cylinders that looked more like burned wood than books. So when they were discovered in the 1700s, people tried to open them, but that usually destroyed them. So for centuries, experts were stuck with one of the greatest archaeological prizes ever found, while also being warned not to physically unroll it. Today, scientists are using X-rays and artificial intelligence to virtually read them without touching them, and they have started recovering words sealed for nearly 2,000 years. But the warning still stands. One wrong move could erase a lost ancient text forever. These scrolls survived a volcanic eruption. The thing that may finally destroy them is human curiosity. In 2023, researchers studying a cave near the Dead Sea were examining an ancient inscription when they found a hidden crevice. Inside were 4 Roman swords and the head of a javelin, preserved for roughly 1,900 years. The wooden and leather parts were still there, which almost never happens with weapons this old. The leading theory is that Jewish rebels captured them from Roman soldiers, then hid them in the cave for later use. But later use never came. The swords remained there untouched behind rock and darkness, like a war cache frozen in time. Experts were already surveying these caves, partly because looters have been destroying ancient sites in the Judea desert. So the warning here is practical, not supernatural. These objects survived rebellion, empire, and 2,000 years underground. The real danger was people finding them before archaeologists did. In Egypt's Saqqara necropolis, the tomb of Kentika dates back to more than 4,000 years to the Old Kingdom. Kentika was a high-ranking official, and his tomb contained rare carved scenes connected to the Egyptian calendar. But the tomb also carried something more ominous, an ancient warning inscription against anyone who desecrated it. This was not a modern mummy curse invented by newspapers. Ancient Egyptians really did place warnings on tombs to protect the dead and the sacred space. Then, in 2025, officials confirmed that a limestone painting had vanished from Kentika's tomb. Someone had entered a tomb with an ancient warning on it, removed a 4,000-year-old relief, and walked out. The real issue is theft and damage, obviously, but the symbolism is hard to ignore. The tomb warned people not to violate it, and thousands of years later, someone did exactly that. I don't know, man, the threat of a curse is definitely enough for me to stay away. Ancient Greek curse tablets were usually thin sheets of lead, scratched with tiny writing, folded, pierced, buried, or thrown into wells and graves. They were not decorations, they were ritual weapons. Some cursed business rivals, some targeted lovers, some tried to silence witnesses in court. Archaeologists have even found lead figurines with their hands tied behind their back, sealed inside containers with curses written against the people they represented. That is what makes these objects so strange to study. They were not meant to be read by us. They were hidden underground because the people who made them believed the dead, the gods, or the underworld would receive them. Modern experts study them as evidence of ancient language, religion, fear, and conflict, but every time one is opened and translated, it also means a private act of ancient magic has been disturbed. In 1965, archaeologists excavating a waterlogged tomb in Hubei, China, found a bronze sword inside a wooden scabbard. It had been buried for more than 2,000 years in conditions that would have damaged it badly. But when the sword was removed, the blade was still almost untarnished and still sharp. The inscription identified it as the Sword of Gojian, King of Wei, and it became legendary because its preservation seemed almost impossible. But here is the part that feels like a warning. In 1994, while the sword was on loan in Singapore, it was accidentally damaged, leaving a tiny crack in the blade. After that, China reportedly stopped allowing it to leave the country, which, fair enough. It survived over 2,000 years underground, then modern handling damaged it in seconds. Again, classic. The ancient Hittite capital of Hattusa in modern Turkey, there is a polished green stone sitting among the ruins of a once powerful Bronze Age empire. The Hittites left behind temples, walls, gates, carvings, and thousands of tablets, so we know a lot about their laws, their wars, and their gods. But nobody has fully explained this green stone. It has no inscription telling us what it was. Some believe it may have had ritual significance. Visitors often touch it and treat it like something powerful, while archaeologists are much more cautious. Officially, its purpose is uncertain, and that uncertainty is exactly what makes it unsettling. In a city full of written records, one of the most memorable objects is something nobody can explain. In 2018, construction workers in Alexandria, Egypt, uncovered a massive black granite sarcophagus buried underground. It was nearly 9 feet long, sealed with mortar, and did not appear to have been opened by looters. The internet immediately warned officials not to open it, half joking that nobody needed to unleash whatever was inside. Archaeologists opened it anyway. Inside were 3 skeletons submerged in dark, red-brown sewage water that had leaked into the coffin over time. There was no royal mummy, no ancient monster, no world-ending curse, just human remains, a horrible smell, and a very strange burial scene. The Terracotta Army is famous, but the actual tomb of China's first emperor is still sealed. The soldiers, horses, and weapons are only part of the larger mausoleum complex. The central burial chamber has never been excavated. Ancient historians describe the tomb as an underground palace filled with rare treasures, crossbow traps, and rivers of mercury representing the waterways of the world. For a long time, that sounded like legend, but then modern testing found unusually high mercury levels around the tomb mound. That does not prove every ancient detail is literal, but it is enough for experts to take the danger seriously. There is also the preservation problem. When the terracotta warriors were exposed to air, their paint began flaking away almost immediately. So the tomb remains closed, not because experts cannot find it, but because opening it too soon could destroy whatever is inside. Across the ancient Mediterranean, people buried written objects with the dead. Thin metal sheets, lead texts, ritual instructions, magical formulas, names of gods, enemies, spirits, and protective forces. Some were meant to guide the dead, some were meant to protect them, others were meant to harm or control the living. What makes these objects unsettling is that they were not created for public display. The secrecy was part of the ritual. So when archaeologists unfold, scan, translate, and publish these objects, they are recovering history, but also breaking the original boundary around the object. Maybe that is the real warning behind all of these discoveries. Not that every ancient object is cursed, but the past has limits. And sometimes the more powerful an object feels, the more careful we should be before deciding we have the right to open it.
If you go up into the high plains of western Bolivia, right near the Sajama volcano, the ground is covered in a giant web of perfectly straight lines. They cover over 8,000 square miles, making it easily one of the largest archaeological sites on the planet. Unlike the Nazca lines in Peru that show pictures of monkeys and spiders, these are just straight lines. They're basically paths anywhere from 3 to 10 feet wide, and they cut right through hills and brush. Some of these lines run for 12 miles straight without bending a single time. The local people made them thousands of years ago by scraping away the dark surface rocks and soil to show the lighter dirt underneath. Doing that over miles of rugged, uneven mountains without any modern mapping tools, that's a crazy amount of work. Archaeologists think people walked these lines as holy paths to visit different shrines and burial towers scattered around the desert, but nobody knows for sure why they needed to build them on such a massive scale like this. Right behind the famous Temple of Seti I in Abydos, Egypt, there's a giant pit in the ground. Inside that pit is a structure called the Osirion. It looks completely out of place compared to the regular Egyptian temples around it. Most temples in Egypt have thin walls covered in colorful carvings and hieroglyphs. The Osirion doesn't have any of that. It's made of giant, plain granite pillars that don't have any decorations at all. Some of these blocks weigh up to 100 tons though. The builders intentionally put the structure over a natural underground spring, so the center of it sits like an island surrounded by deep water. Because the groundwater keeps rising, the floor has been flooded for thousands of years. Historians say it was built around 1300 BCE as a tomb for the god Osiris, but because it sits so much lower than the main temple and uses a totally different building style, a lot of researchers think it's actually a remnant of a much older building that the later Egyptians just dug up and built around. Next up, we have a stone slab covered in etchings, which sits in a grassy park right next to a housing development in Scotland. Underneath the grass is a massive stone slab, about 42 feet long and 26 feet wide. It's called the Cockno Stone. It's covered in some of the weirdest prehistoric carvings in Europe. Neolithic people carved these shapes about 5,000 years ago. The whole surface is just packed with over 100 symbols, mostly circles inside other circles with long lines cutting through them. Some of the shapes even look like footprints, but with 4 toes. Archaeologists aren't exactly sure what this thing is. Some people think it's an ancient star map for tracking constellations. Others think it's just religious art. It caused a lot of arguments, and there were such big crowds coming here to check it out that the government actually buried the whole stone in dirt back in 1965 to keep people from ruining it. Yeah, because hooligans were coming around messing with it. It dug it up for a quick 3D scan in 2016, but right now it's still sitting completely hidden underground again. Over in West Java, Indonesia, there's a big hill covered in shattered volcanic stone columns. For a long time, everyone just assumed it was a natural mountain with a few old stone terraces built on top. But geologists started testing the hill, and now there's a debate over whether the entire mountain is actually a giant buried pyramid. Scientists used ground-penetrating radar and drilled holes deep into the hill. And they found out the inside isn't just natural dirt and rock. The hill is actually built in layers. The top terraces are only a few thousand years old, but underneath that, the scans show big hidden chambers, stacked volcanic rocks going down 90 feet. They even pulled up old organic material from the bottom layers that dated back over 10,000 years, which would make it way older than the pyramids in Egypt. And researchers on site say the stones are packed together with an ancient type of mortar. Could mean some ancient civilization was building massive structures back when most of our ancestors were just hunting and gathering. That's what Indonesian geologist Danny Hilman Natuwijaya thinks. He believes the site was built as this giant pyramid 9,000 to 20,000 years ago. Deep in the bamboo forests of Asuka, Japan, there's a big piece of carved granite sitting on a hill. It's called the Masada no Awafune, which means the rock ship of Masada. The thing is huge. It's about 36 feet long, 26 feet wide, and 15 feet high. It weighs around 800 tons. And it's shaped really weird, as you can see. The top of the rock was flattened almost completely straight, and someone cut 2 perfectly square holes right into the middle. There's a bit of a stone ridge separating the 2 holes, and then around the bottom sides of the rock, there's a grid pattern of crisscross grooves chiseled into the granite. Archaeologists don't really know who carved this, when they did it, or why. Some think it was an old astronomical tool, because the center ridge lines up with a specific mountain peak. Others think it was supposed to be the base of some giant tomb that someone just gave up on building, but there are 0 written records about it, so it's really a mystery. Over in eastern India, there's a mountain range with some pretty incredible stonework. They're called the Barabar Caves. They were cut directly into giant boulders over 2,000 years ago. The outside, they just look like small doors cut into big rocks, but when you walk inside, the walls and ceilings are almost polished. They're super smooth. Granite is incredibly hard, but the builders managed to flatten and buff the walls to the point where they can reflect light like a mirror. Historians know the technique as Morian polish, but they don't really know what kind of hand tools can make granite that flat and smooth inside a dark cave like this. On top of that, the shape of the rooms creates really cool acoustics. Because the walls are perfectly smooth and curved, sound gets trapped. If you say a single word, the sound waves just bounce around in a loop. Check this out. Now, this may not look like much, but what if I told you it was made thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago? This is the Sabu disc, a very strange ancient Egyptian artifact believed to date back to around 3000 to 2800 BCE. It was discovered in 1936 in the Saqqara necropolis, specifically in the tomb of an official named Sabu, which is how it got its name. This disc is made from schist, a type of stone known for its durability, and as you can see, it has a unique design for the time. It looks very modern, like a broken piece of machinery or something. Some researchers think it could have been some sort of ceremonial object, given the fact that it was found in a tomb. Others think that it might have had a more practical function. But the advanced design of this thing might mean it could have belonged to a more sophisticated technology that's just been lost to time. And did the Egyptians even build it themselves, or was there some extraterrestrial influence? Could the ancient Egyptians have been in contact with advanced beings from another planet? Well, that's pretty much what this whole video is about. The Abydos carvings found in the ancient temple of Seti I and Abydos seem to depict this mix of traditional hieroglyphs with some seriously strange images. When you look closely, you might notice that some of these carvings look a lot like modern vehicles, like a helicopter, a submarine, a jet plane. One of the things looks a lot like the land speeder from Star Wars to me, and to a lot of other people online. The sort of eerie resemblance to things we see today, excluding the land speeder, unfortunately, has led to some wild theories. One of the most popular ideas is that these carvings were depictions of some of the ancient Egyptians' advanced technology, possibly thanks to extraterrestrial visitors. Imagine aliens coming to Earth thousands and thousands of years ago and sharing their tech with Egyptians. It's just a fun idea. And if that is true, we also gotta ask, who were these people? Or I guess, what were these people or things? Were they from another planet? Or could they maybe have been time travelers from our future? Take a look at this odd coin. What historical politician is that supposed to be exactly? Looks a lot like an alien to me. So there's been this story circulating online about this collection of coins found in Egypt that seem to depict aliens. The coins apparently date back to the 1st century BCE and feature a humanoid figure with large eyes, a tiny mouth, bald head, your classic gray. There are also coins with your typical flying saucer carved into them. The coins were supposedly discovered by a group of construction workers who were renovating a house in southern Egypt. Now, while digging in the basement, they stumbled on a small box filled with these coins, all in surprisingly good condition. After the find, the coins were taken to a local museum for further examination. Archaeologists dated the coins and concluded that they were likely minted in Egypt. Now, are these coins evidence of ancient alien contact? Did the ancient Egyptians carve their extraterrestrial visitors into their money? Well, sure, there are some spooky artifacts and mysteries surrounding ancient Egypt, but these coins are hoaxes. At least I'm 99.9% sure. I don't know, there's always that small chance though. Well, this is an odd looking creature, isn't it? On March 21st of 2016, a post on the website Worldwide Science Stories claimed that archaeologists had discovered a, quote, alien mummy inside an Egyptian pyramid. The story came from sources who wanted to remain anonymous. According to the report, the mummy was found by archaeologists near Lahoun while exploring a small pyramid linked to the 12th dynasty of Senusret II. This alleged alien mummy was said to be between 150 and 160 centimeters long, supposedly dating back over 2,000 years. Now, apparently the details about this mysterious find weren't disclosed right away. And again, a source from the Egyptian Department of Antiquities confirmed the discovery but insisted on remaining unnamed. Now, it's an odd looking mummy, definitely looks like your classic alien to me. The large oval shaped eyes, the small slit for a mouth, very reptilian, and apparently inscriptions found near the tomb referred to the creature as Osserunet, a name interpreted to mean star or sent from heaven. Now, this is a pretty controversial story, as you can probably imagine. A lot of people think this one is a hoax, but it isn't the only strange looking mummy found in ancient Egypt. There have been lots, so is it possible that there are other ones that have just been covered up? Who knows? The Thule papyrus is a really cool find. The story starts back in 1933 when Alberto Thule, who is a curator at the Vatican Museums, discovered a roll of papyrus in Cairo. This document is said to date back to the time of Pharaoh Thutmose III around 1480 BCE. But here's where it gets really strange. After Thule passed away, this scroll just vanished without a trace, and years later an Italian Egyptologist named Boris de Waltz claimed he'd found a transcription of the Thule papyrus, and according to his translation, the text tells an incredible story about a day when a large disc appeared in the sky. This disc was about 164 feet long and 16.5 feet wide and gave off a really awful smell. Then more discs kept appearing, shining brighter than the sun. The pharaoh ordered incense offerings to appease the Egyptian god Amun-Ra and commanded that the event be recorded for future generations. Thus, we now have the Thule papyrus. If you fly a plane over the deserts of Jordan, which I'm sure most of you do in your spare time, you can see a bunch of massive, almost perfectly stone rings stamped into the landscape. Archaeologists call them the Big Circles. There are about 12 of them scattered across Jordan, with one more sitting just north in Syria. And they're basically identical in how they were put together. These circles are huge, ranging anywhere from 700 to over 1,400 feet across. But if you were to walk up to one on the ground, you probably wouldn't even notice it. They're just low walls built out of stones piled a few feet high. Crazy part is that whoever built them managed to make them almost perfectly round without being able to see their own work from the air. A British pilot first spotted them from the sky back in 1920, but it wasn't until recently that researchers started really mapping them. Based on old Roman roads that cut right through some of the rings, we know they're at least 2,000 years old, but they could easily be much older. Back in 2003, scientists were using sonar to map the bottom of the Sea of Galilee in Israel when they came across something pretty bizarre. Sitting on the lake bed was a giant cone-shaped mound made of thousands of boulders. It stands nearly 32 feet tall and spans about 230 feet wide. Researchers estimate the whole pile weighs around 60,000 tons, heavier than most modern warships. When divers swam down to check it out, they confirmed it was definitely man-made. The rocks are natural boulders up to 3 feet long. There are no tool marks on them, but they're piled together very intentionally. It wasn't built underwater though. They would have built it on dry land thousands of years ago, then it was submerged later on when the water levels rose. But, I mean, who went through all the trouble of moving 60,000 tons of heavy volcanic rock to this specific spot? In the desert of southern Peru, right near Lake Titicaca, you'll find a massive rock wall that's been carved into a giant mysterious shape. It's called Aramumuru, or the Gate of the Gods. It's basically a huge 23-foot square cut. It's basically a huge 23-foot square cut directly into a solid cliff face. Right in the bottom center of this giant square is a smaller niche that looks kind of like a door, standing about 6.5 feet tall. But if you walk up to it, you realize it doesn't open. It just stops at solid rock. There are no tunnels, there's no hidden chambers, no buildings behind it, so why is it there? Well, mainstream archaeologists think the site was created by the Tiwanaku civilization, or maybe an even older pre-Inca culture, but because there are no organic remains left behind here, nobody can date this thing perfectly. There's some very interesting native folklore behind it though. The Aymara people have called it the Devil's Doorway for centuries. Their ancient legends say this wasn't a dead-end wall at all, but a portal used by powerful shamans to travel to different realms. Even today, the site attracts people who swear they can feel this strange vibration or hear a low buzzing sound when they press their forehead against the center of the stone door. Finally, we're going to a wheat field in a small town in Germany. It doesn't sound all that interesting, but it actually is. Back in 1991, a pilot flying overhead noticed this giant circular shadow in the crops. An archaeologist dug up the area. They realized they were looking at the oldest solar observatory on the planet. It's called the Gosek Circle. It was built roughly 7,000 years ago. The whole monument is about 220 feet wide. Originally, it was a big ditch wrapped around two giant circular fences made of thousands of heavy wooden posts. The builders left 3 specific gaps, or gates, in these fences, one facing north, one facing southeast, and one facing southwest. The alignment here is what's really interesting. If you stand right in the dead center of the circle during the winter solstice, the sun rises perfectly through the southeast gate and sets directly behind the southwest gate. It is a perfect calendar built by simple Stone Age farmers, way before anyone thought humans knew enough about math or the sky to track the sun with this kind of precision. There's also a mystery as to what else went on in this giant wooden ring. When workers excavated the center, they didn't just find old pots, farming tools, they found a bunch of animal skulls and human bones that looked like they'd been scraped clean before they were buried. Since these people didn't leave behind any writing, we have no idea who they were, but it seems like this was a possible ritual site of some kind. Next, let's talk about Egyptian hieroglyphs in general and some of the odd places they've been spotted, like on crashed UFOs, for example. The infamous Roswell incident in 1947 and the Rendlesham Forest sightings in 1980 were both said to have strange symbols carved into the sides of the UFOs. Some witnesses claimed to see what looked like Egyptian hieroglyphs on the sides of both craft, incredibly strange, and the symbols discovered on the Roswell UFO are said to have matched the ones found on the Rendlesham object. One specific design is apparently a triangle with two spheres that appears on both. So why would UFOs have Egyptian-looking symbols etched into them? In the Dendera temple complex, there's a famous relief with an image dubbed the Dendera Light. The image depicts a snake emerging from a lotus flower, seemingly held up by a pillar with human arms at the end. But you gotta look more closely to see that. What's immediately obvious to us modern folks is that this looks a lot like a giant light bulb, specifically a Crookes tube, an early type of light bulb that was invented in the 19th century. There's a pretty uncanny resemblance, really, but is it just a coincidence? Or is this ancient artwork actually depicting a piece of advanced technology? Another interesting thing about this one, the specific room featuring the Dendera light is the only one in the entire temple with no evidence of fire burning lamps. In every other part of the temple, archaeologists found residues from what looked to have been lamps, but not here. So if the room was completely dark, how did the ancient Egyptians light it up? And why would they go to the trouble of carving such an elaborate image if it was just going to be hidden in darkness? Well, maybe the room wasn't pitch black. Maybe they illuminated it with some other, more advanced method. The Saqqara bird is a cute little sculpture, but it's also led to some pretty interesting conversations. Discovered in an ancient Egyptian tomb near Saqqara, this wooden figure is around 2,200 years old. Now, at first glance, it looks like, a toy bird, but looking closer, and it also kind of looks like a model airplane. The wings look a lot more like a plane than a bird's wings. So it's got people wondering, did the ancient Egyptians have some knowledge of flight? Back in 1969, an Egyptian doctor named Khalil Messiah proposed a pretty cool idea. What if this bird was actually a model of an ancient flying machine? People have crafted replicas of the artifact to test how aerodynamic it is, and some of these models have been found to glide pretty well when thrown. If it's not an ancient depiction of a plane, that kid back in the day had a pretty cool toy. Well, we're talking about another find in Saqqara. Near the Pyramid of Djoser, archaeologists came across 24 coffin-shaped black boxes carved from solid Aswan granite. This rock is incredibly tough, so tough that even modern tools have trouble scratching it. So, the fact that some of these boxes have intricate hieroglyphs etched into them is pretty impressive. Not only that, but each box is massive, weighing over 100 tons. Some people think the craftsmanship is so advanced that it feels impossible for ancient Egyptians to have done it alone. And for those who believe in alien involvement, there's a theory that these designs came from somewhere else or were inspired by something advanced. And of course, I can't do this list without talking about the Great Pyramids themselves. Now, while I'm of the belief that ancient Egyptians were just crafty and way ahead of their time, even I can't deny how enticing the idea of extraterrestrial beings assisting in their creation is. Now, aside from how incredible the pyramids are and the mystery surrounding how they were built, we also gotta talk about where they're positioned. The three main pyramids are aligned in a way that closely matches the stars in Orion's belt. The Egyptians definitely had a sophisticated understanding of astronomy. Even more fascinating is the fact that the sizes of the pyramids seem to correspond to the brightness of the stars. Two of the pyramids are nearly identical in height, while the third is about half as tall. In the night sky, two of the stars in Orion's belt shine brightly, with the third star being dimmer, mirroring the layout of the pyramids. The pyramids are also positioned in a nearly straight line with the North Magnetic Pole, so it's very impressive that an ancient civilization had such an advanced knowledge of science, geometry, and astronomy. They had to have had skills and understanding similar to what we have today to design and construct the pyramids with such perfect alignment. And again, the size of the pyramids themselves is also just remarkable. So what do you all think? Did they have some help from extraterrestrial visitors, or were the ancient Egyptians just that ahead of their time? A town in southern Turkey, archaeologists think they may have just found the real coffin of the original St. Nicholas, the guy who inspired Santa Claus. The stone sarcophagus was found at the Church of St. Nicholas, which has been an excavation site since the late 80s. The limestone coffin is about 6 feet long, buried 5 feet down, and was found in a 2-story annex of the church. According to Associate Professor Ebru Fatma Fandik, that they didn't even realize they were digging into a burial site until animal bones and clay lamps started showing up. That's when they hit the sarcophagus. St. Nicholas died in 343 and was buried at this site. Later, a grander church was built over it under Emperor Theodosius II, and that's when his remains were supposedly moved into this sarcophagus. In 1087, a group of sailors from Bari, Italy, broke into his tomb and took most of his bones back to their city. They placed them in a new shrine at the Basilica di San Nicola, where they're still kept today. But not all the bones were taken. During the First Crusade around 1099, another group, this time from Venice, raided what was left of the tomb and took the remaining bones. So, in 1953, scientists confirmed that the bones from both cities came from the same person, but whether that's actually St. Nick is still up for debate. At the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, one of the most sacred places in Christianity, archaeologists recently found something that had been sitting in plain sight for centuries. It's a massive stone altar from the Crusader period, dating back to the 1100s. For years, people thought it was just part of the wall, mostly because it was covered in layers of graffiti and chunks of fallen stone. But once researchers took a closer look, they realized that this thing had been deliberately carved and set in place as part of the original Crusader structure. It's built from massive limestone blocks, including one with a cross carved right into it. According to archaeologist David Gurvich, we've talked about a place where people believe Jesus was buried, so to uncover part of a forgotten altar from the Crusader period is huge. It had been partially destroyed over time, and a lot of it was buried under hundreds of years' worth of rubble. In Reading, England, a church relic resurfaced that people thought was lost forever. A mummified human hand said to belong to St. James the Apostle. It originally came from Reading Abbey, a huge medieval monastery founded in 1121 by King Henry I. During the 1500s, when King Henry VIII shut down England's monasteries and looted them, a lot of relics disappeared. Somehow this one survived though. It was hidden inside an iron box and rediscovered centuries later by workers doing repairs. Eventually, it made its way to St. Peter's Roman Catholic Church in Marlow, where it stayed locked away for years. The hand was, of course, dried and shriveled and partially wrapped in fabric, but it was still clearly human. Went back on display briefly in 2018 before being sent to be studied. Experts can't 100% prove it belonged to James the Apostle, but based on its age, the location, and how relics were handled at the time, it fits. In 2002, a collector went public with a limestone bone box known as an ossuary that had an inscription scratched into the side: James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. If it's legit, that's a huge deal. It would be the only known artifact that actually names Jesus of Nazareth. The box itself is real, dates back to the 1st century. Experts checked the aging on the stone, the weathering and the letters, all of it, but big question was whether the inscription was added much later to, boost its value. That started one of the longest and most expensive court battles in archaeology. The Israeli Antiquities Authority charged the owner with forgery. The whole thing turned into a circus. After years of trial, the charges were dropped. The science couldn't prove the inscription was fake. Some people still doubt it, but no one's been able to say for sure it's modern. In 2023, archaeologists in Germany found something strange in a Roman-era grave. A silver scroll buried with a man who died nearly 1800 years before. When they carefully unrolled the scroll, found it was inscribed with 18 lines of Greek writing, including the names of Jesus, Mary, and several Christian saints. That alone was wild, because this was found in Frankfurt, way north of where Christianity was thought to have spread at the time. The guy was buried sometime between 230 and 270 CE, which means Christians were already up there way earlier than anyone thought about 100 years ahead of the usual timeline. Researchers say the writing on the scroll was meant to act like a charm or spiritual protection. The scroll itself is tiny, just a few inches long, and was buried in an iron capsule next to the man's remains. According to archaeologist Dr. Erwin Emmerling, this is the earliest physical evidence of Christianity in this region, and it changes what we thought we knew about how fast it spread. In 2023, construction crews were doing work near an old Dominican monastery in Poland when they cracked open something really cool, a medieval knight's tomb. It had a massive stone slab with a full carving of a knight in armor, sword, shield, all of it. And when archaeologists lifted it, there was a skeleton laid out perfectly underneath, exactly where you'd expect him to be. The carving was done on limestone from Gotland, which is a Swedish island. The knight was tall, probably someone important, and this grave was built to show it. The carving had symbols like a coat of arms, so whoever buried him wanted people to know exactly who he was, or at least that he was worth remembering. The area used to be a church cemetery way back in the 12th century, and this tomb probably dates to the 1200s or 1300s. And fun fact, the whole thing was under what used to be an ice cream shop. So the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem is supposed to be the spot where Jesus was crucified, buried, and resurrected. It's one of the most famous religious sites in the world, but while restoring part of the floor, researchers found something small but weirdly important: ancient seeds. They dug down and found traces of grape seeds, olive pits, and pollen buried in the soil under the church. Now, that doesn't sound all that exciting, but those plants match up with the gospel descriptions of a garden being nearby at the time of the crucifixion. Grapes and olives were big in that region, especially for things like wine and oil used in rituals, so finding that kind of evidence under the building is kind of cool. The seeds were found in layers that date back about 2,000 years, so the timeline lines up as well. Doesn't prove every detail of the story, obviously, but it's enough to make archaeologists pretty excited. Right near the southern wall of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, archaeologists were digging in a spot known as the Opal, and ended up finding a stash of Byzantine gold. They found a small stash of gold buried in the floor, like actual treasure. There were 36 gold coins, a gold bar, 2 earrings, and a round medallion engraved with a menorah, a Torah scroll, and a shofar. That medallion is cool because it's Jewish imagery, but it was found in a Christian-era building. The coins date back to around the early 600s, right before the Persian army rolled through the city, so it looks like someone buried their valuables before things got ugly and just never made it back. It sat undisturbed for 1,400 years. The fact that Jewish religious symbols were found inside a Christian-era home also shows that this part of the city wasn't strictly divided. People were living close together, even if they didn't believe the same things, and all that info came from a handful of gold buried in someone's floor. Archaeologists digging in northern Ethiopia found the ruins of a 4th century Christian church. It's the oldest one discovered so far in sub-Saharan Africa. The site's called Beta Samati, and it used to be part of the Aksumite Empire, a big trade hub back in the day. The church was built in basilica style with stone walls, columns, and a central platform that lines up with early Christian designs from the Roman world. Found crosses, ceramic incense burners, carved pendants, a gold ring with a bull's head on it. That ring probably came from somewhere outside Ethiopia, maybe traded in from Jordan or Arabia. There were also dozens of small animal figurines, mostly of cattle, scattered around the site. Inscriptions found inside mention Christ by name, which is a big deal considering how early this site is. This means Christianity had, of course, already reached this part of Africa by the early 300s, so way earlier than most people thought. The area was connected to trading routes that stretched all the way to the Middle East, so ideas, goods, and religions were constantly flowing through. And in 2021, archaeologists working in northern Jordan explored an old underground church built inside a cave, and inside it, they came across a tiny lead scroll covered in ancient writing. The church had been carved into the rock and might be one of the earliest places where Christians gathered in secret. The scroll was tightly rolled, only about the size of a matchstick, so they had to scan it with high-res imaging to even read what was inside. The writing's in ancient Hebrew, and even though some of it still hasn't been fully decoded, early scans showed names linked to Jesus and what might be early Christian symbols. The scroll might have been used like a prayer or a kind of protective charm, something people back then would have kept hidden from Roman authorities, which is why this was found buried under the church's altar. Researchers are still being cautious about dating it, but think it could push back written references to early Christianity by decades, maybe even from the 1st century. If that's the case, this could be one of the earliest written traces of Christianity outside of Jerusalem.
On this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the Phaistos disc. There is a single clay disc that has been driving experts up the wall for over a century, covered in a bewildering mix of symbols pressed carefully into a spiral. Known as the Phaistos disc, it emerged from Minoan ruins on Crete and refuses to yield any straightforward meaning. Some think its signs might spell out a sacred prayer, others suspect a royal proclamation, a calendar, or even a children's rhyme. Every fresh theory stalls without a second example of its mysterious script to confirm or deny any hunches. Archaeologists pore over the symbols, hoping to spot a pattern that might point to a known language, but no code breaker has cracked it yet. Each attempt to unravel its secrets only highlights how little we know, making this small, sun-baked artifact a stubborn reminder that the ancient world still has plenty of tricks up its sleeve. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Terra mummies in the Taklamakan Desert. High and dry beneath the Taklamakan's shifting dunes, remarkably well-preserved mummies have turned centuries of assumptions about ancient migrations upside down. Their dusty linen wraps and elaborate woolen textiles hint at complex influences that refuse to sit neatly within traditional East versus West narratives. DNA analysis shows these people had genetic markers connecting them to regions far beyond Central Asia, suggesting old trade routes and cultural exchanges were far richer and more tangled than anyone ever guessed. Yet, who were they really? The desert's secret travelers, traders, or lost pioneers, and what language did they speak? Archaeologists sift through their patterned robes and the remnants of their meals, trying to coax out a story. For now, these silent ancestors remain a riddle without a clear answer, proving that the ancient world may have been far more interconnected and mysterious than we ever even realized. Next, we are talking about the Shanxing civilization. Something about this ancient Chinese culture slips right through our fingers, leaving behind jaw-droppingly ornate bronze masks and no handy roadmap for understanding who they were. At Shanxing, archaeologists have dug up piles of massive masks with staring eyes, gleaming gold leaf ornaments, and finely carved jade and ivory objects, all crafted by skilled hands nearly 4 millennia ago. Yet, no one knows what language these people spoke, what gods they worshipped, or how their community fit into the tapestry of Bronze Age China. They built impressive sites, then vanished without leaving a single written signpost. Research teams keep uncovering new treasures, adding layers of complexity rather than clarity. Each find nudges us closer to the heart of a civilization that somehow thrived and then simply faded, leaving future generations to guess at the true story tucked behind its mysterious artistry. Next, we are talking about the Karnak stones. Centuries before the pyramids rose, thousands of massive stones were painstakingly hauled into place on the windswept plains of Brittany, forming rows and circles that stretch for miles and boggle the mind. These are the Karnak stones, erected around 4500 BCE by people who left no written words to explain their staggering achievement. Were they marking holy ground, charting the path of the stars, or celebrating ancestral heroes long since lost to time? Not a single inscription, artifact cache, or buried secret passage has offered a conclusive answer. What's left are countless theories: a grand pilgrimage route, a sprawling open-air temple, maybe even a prehistoric observatory. Yet each new guess slides off these monoliths without sticking. After centuries of research, the mystery remains intact, leaving archaeologists to scratch their heads. pyramids. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Gigantea temples. Something about these ancient Maltese temples is downright haunting. Enormous stone blocks stacked with precision by people who left no written word to explain their motives. Gigantea, dating back over 5,000 years, showcases altars that may have hosted solemn rituals and hearths that once glowed red with embers, surrounded by walls that towered over early island communities. Some speculate that priests performed fertility rites in these dim stone corridors. Others suspect ceremonies tied to the seasons, or visits by oracles who channeled divine knowledge through hidden chambers. Yet, no one can say for certain what beliefs guided this early civilization, what prayers they whispered, or which gods they hoped to please. The temple's creators vanished without ever jotting down a clue, leaving modern archaeologists rummaging through rubble, trying to decode a vanished spiritual world. In our number 5 spot today, we have Great Zimbabwe. High among the rolling hills of southeastern Africa lies a city that once pulsed with trade and influence, yet now sits silent and half understood. Great Zimbabwe, built by the Shona people between the 11th and 15th centuries CE, boasted massive granite enclosures fitted so perfectly they needed no mortar, stone towers that soared over sprawling settlements, and wealth drawn from far-reaching commercial ties. But here's the catch. Despite decades of digging, researchers can't fully pin down how its rulers organized society, who exactly wielded real power, or how far their trading networks truly stretched. Early European explorers clung to racist myths that tried to erase African ingenuity, clouding the real story for generations. While today's scholars have reclaimed the narrative and uncovered much about this remarkable city, its core secrets, such as what caused its decline and how its leaders maintained authority, remain maddeningly just out of reach. Each new excavation season might finally crack the code, but for now, Great Zimbabwe keeps its true story tucked behind stone walls and centuries of silent mystery.
The Karnak stones stretch out across the land. In western France, over 3,000 tall stones are lined up in long rows that go on for miles. Most of them were put in place between 4,500 and 3,300 BCE, which makes them older than Stonehenge. Some of the stones are taller than a one-story building, others are smaller, and the spacing between them slowly changes as the rows continue. That wasn't careless work. Archaeologists believe the layout was planned very carefully, even if we no longer understand what the planning behind it actually meant. There's no giant temple or tomb at Karnak, which makes it harder to explain. It doesn't clearly mark graves, and it doesn't sit next to a major settlement. Whatever was happening here wasn't about living space. So what are the stones for then? Ceremony? Marking something? Who knows? But setting up this many stones would have taken years of work and a lot of people. Each stone had to be dug out, moved, stood upright, and secured so it wouldn't fall. So there was some sort of meaning behind these things. If you walked past Rajam El Hiri on the ground, you might not even notice it. It looks like piles of dark rock spread across an open field, but from above, it looks like Deep Space Nine crashed to the ground. The site was built around 3000 BCE using tens of thousands of stones carefully stacked without cement or glue. In the center is a large mound, which may have been added later, possibly for burial. Some of the gaps between the stones line up perfectly with the sunrise on the longest day of the year, so the layout was not random. What's missing is a nearby town. There's no sign that large numbers of people lived close enough to, conveniently build something like this. That means people traveled here, worked together, and then left when it was done. Not very practical. So whatever it was used for, it must have been very important to them. The Ganjina temples in Malta were already ancient when the pyramids were being built. They date back to 3600 to 3200 BCE, and they're some of the oldest stone buildings still standing today. People later believed that giants built them, mostly because the stones are so big, it's hard to imagine normal people moving them. Some of the blocks weigh over 50 tons, yet they were lifted and placed without metal tools or wheels. The builders shaped the stones so they fit together tightly, creating thick walls and rooms that have survived for thousands of years. The layout is carefully planned. The temples have rounded rooms connected by narrow walkways, and archaeologists found animal bones and carved figures inside. These likely were not homes. They were built for special events, Seems like rituals may have taken place here. Whatever methods they used to build them though, they clearly worked, even without the tools that you'd expect to need to create a place like this. From the outside, Bernanès looks like a long, low hill sitting near the coast of Brittany, but this hill was actually constructed, and a very long time ago, around 4500 BCE. That makes it older than Stonehenge and also older than the pyramids. It's one of the earliest large stone monuments ever discovered in Europe. Inside, it's packed with stone passageways and burial chambers. There are 11 separate chambers, all built using stacked stone, and the entire thing stretches over 230 feet long. To build it, people moved and stacked thousands of tons of rock, shaping a massive monument without cement or metal tools. Some of the stones inside are carved with simple symbols as well, so this wasn't just a pile of rocks thrown together. There was some sort of meaning behind it. Archaeologists believe it was used as a burial site for important people, possibly over many generations. It's amazing something like this still exists though. At the time, people were still figuring out farming, yet here they were, organizing large groups to build something that's still standing to this day. Scientists in Turkey just made a huge discovery that could actually prove Noah's Ark was real. For years, they've been looking at this giant structure in eastern Turkey called the Dura Pınar Formation, which some people think could be the location of the Ark. It's 530 feet long and matches the size the Bible describes for the Ark, and it's right near the Turkey-Iran border. Then, just last year, researchers deciphered an ancient Babylonian tablet at the British Museum. The tablet has a poem that talks about a man, probably maybe Noah, and his family landing an ark that was supposed to save life. It also talks about how the world was created, which got people thinking this could link to the Dura Pınar site. The latest discovery adds even more weight to the idea. Scientists took some rock and soil samples from the site and sent them to Istanbul for testing. The results came back with traces of clay, marine deposits, and tiny seafood bits like mollusks. If Noah really had the Ark, those little sea creatures would have been on board as well. The dating of the materials puts them around 3,500 to 5,000 years old, which does line up with when the flood in Genesis is said to have happened, around 3300 BCE. The team believes the area was once covered by water, which could be a sign of a big flood event. Now, even if you're still skeptical, at the very least, this research could be evidence that the Noah's Ark story did have at least some basis in reality. To what extent? That remains to be seen. In the mountains near Napulzi, South Africa, there's something really bizarre carved into a granite cliff, a giant footprint. It's about 4 feet long with 5 distinct toes, an arch, and even what looks like a heel. Some call it the footprint of God. It's so precise that it honestly just looks like someone stepped into the rock while it was still soft. Someone really, really big, mind you. That granite cliff is estimated to be over 200 million years old. That's dinosaur territory. Humans and even our distant ancestors weren't supposed to be anywhere near that timeline, so how do you explain this very human-looking footprint that size in rock this ancient? Scientists say it's just a natural formation that happens to look exactly like a footprint, but come on, really? Like, that's the best explanation we have for this thing? Some just don't buy this, that it can be chalked up to erosion alone. So what then? Is this actually the footprint of some ancient giant? Well, if that's the case, it means it was walking around way before we thought humans ever existed. Of course, no one's claiming giants are 100% confirmed here, but this formation is pretty uncanny. For centuries, the city of Troy was considered nothing more than a good story, a myth cooked up by the Greeks to add some spice to their epic poetry. Homer's Iliad told of gods and heroes, a 10-year siege, a famous wooden horse, and a city that was supposedly wiped off the map. Most historians thought the whole thing was fictional until one eccentric treasure hunter decided to dig. In the 1870s, a German businessman turned amateur archaeologist named Heinrich Schliemann traveled to a dusty hill in modern-day Turkey called Hisarlik. Locals didn't think much of it, it was just another pile of ruins, but Schliemann was convinced that this was the real Troy. Well, after some reckless digging, he literally blasted through layers with dynamite, he discovered stone walls, towers, gates, all these relics from a city that had been destroyed and rebuilt multiple times. One layer, dating to around 1200 BCE, matched the time Homer's war supposedly happened. Among the rubble, Schliemann claimed to find a stash of gold jewelry. Priam's treasure, he called it, after the king of Troy. Whether or not the treasure was authentic is still up for debate, but the city itself, very real. And the deeper archaeologists dug, the more they found that lined up with Homer's account, including signs of a siege and a destruction by fire. So maybe the gods didn't hurl thunderbolts and Achilles didn't have a magical heel, but the war, the city, and the fall, that part might have been true all along. In Hindu mythology, the city of Dwarka is a place of miracles. Built by Lord Krishna, it was said to be a golden city that shimmered on the coastline, full of palaces, gardens, and impossible technology. According to legend, it was so advanced that it had flying machines and automated gates. The entire city supposedly sank beneath the ocean after Krishna's death. For centuries, it was written off as a spiritual allegory, not an actual place. Then came the divers. In the early 2000s, off the coast of Gujarat, marine archaeologists using sonar scans discovered something strange on the ocean floor. A massive grid-like pattern that looked suspiciously like something man-made. They ended up finding stone walls and paved roads spread over a large area, some dating back 9,000 years, older than Egypt's pyramids. They retrieved artifacts too, like pottery shards, stone anchors, and tools, all signs that there was this organized urban area that nobody thought would have existed that early in history. The mainstream scientific world hasn't fully agreed on whether this site is the Dwarka written about in myths, but a lot of Indian scholars believe that it is strong evidence that the legend wasn't just poetic metaphor and that it was based on a real city that got swallowed up by the sea. Story goes that deep beneath the palace of King Minos there was a twisting underground labyrinth built to hold a monster. The Minotaur, half man, half bull, who fed on unlucky prisoners. Every few years, Athens had to send a batch of young people to be tossed in as sacrifices. That's the myth, anyway. And for the longest time, people chalked it up to ancient Greek storytelling. Dramatic and brutal, but made up. But then archaeologists started digging in Knossos on the island of Crete, and what they found was kind of weird. Massive ruins of a palace complex that seemed almost designed to get lost in. Dozens of corridors, staircases that led nowhere, rooms that loop back on themselves, and storage chambers stacked deep underground. It wasn't a literal maze with high stone walls or anything like that, but it had the same confusing, winding structure. Even stranger, the Minoans, the civilization that built it, were obsessed with bulls. They carved bull heads into their art, painted murals of bull leaping ceremonies, and buried bull horns into their foundations. Some historians think that the Minotaur myth might have come from an outsider's twisted interpretation of these Minoan rituals. Throw in earthquakes and a sudden collapse of their society, and you've got all the ingredients for a legend to grow. So maybe there wasn't actually a Minotaur monster lurking around in here, but the palace, the maze, the eerie obsession with bulls, that's real, and this may have been the setting that the legend was based on. This one also comes straight out of the Bible, the book of John to be exact. Jesus heals a blind man by spitting in the dirt, making mud, smearing it on the guy's eyes, and then telling him to go wash it off in the pool of Siloam. Man does, and boom, he can see. For centuries, religious folks believed in the story, but most scholars treated it like a symbolic tale. The pool itself thought to be just a part of biblical folklore. Nice message, not a real place. Well, that changed in 2004, when city workers in Jerusalem were doing some basic repairs on a busted sewage pipe. And while digging, they hit stone steps, and not just a few. What they'd stumbled onto was the edge of this large ancient pool, complete with wide stone staircases leading down into the water. Archaeologists swarmed the site and confirmed it. This wasn't just any old reservoir. This was the pool of Siloam, exactly where the gospel said it would be. They found coins and pottery and other items buried in the mud, all dating back to the Second Temple period, right around the time Jesus would have been walking those streets. The whole layout matched historical texts, and it was clearly used by Jewish pilgrims for ritual cleansing before heading up to the temple. So yeah, they found the pool, and while no one's out here claiming they can prove the miracle, the place where it supposedly happened, that is real, and it sat buried under a modern city for nearly 2,000 years. For a long time, people argued that King David, the guy who took down Goliath with a rock and ruled over a united Israel, might not have been a real person. Some scholars thought he was more of a legendary figure, like King Arthur, inspiring, sure, but no solid evidence to prove he actually existed outside of religious texts. Then in 1993, something odd popped out of the dirt in northern Israel. At an ancient site called Tel Dan, archaeologists came across this broken slab of black basalt with writing carved into it. An inscription in Aramaic dating to the 9th century BCE. It had been repurposed as building material in a wall, which probably helped preserve it. When experts started translating the writing, one phrase jumped out: House of David. This was a huge deal. It was the first time David was mentioned outside of the Bible. It showed that not only did David likely exist, but that his lineage, his dynasty, was powerful and well known enough to be name dropped by his enemies. The stone seems to have been set up by a rival king, bragging about defeating both the king of Israel and someone from the house of David. This doesn't just back up the idea of a real King David, it gave us a glimpse into how feared and influential his bloodline was. For centuries, people treated the legend of the Amazon warrior women from Greek mythology like pure fantasy. Tall, fierce, battle-hardened women who lived in their own society and didn't take orders from any man. That had to be the stuff of legend, right? Well, no, it turns out the Greeks might have been describing a real group after all. Archaeologists have discovered a number of burial mounds called kurgans in the Eurasian steppes, particularly in southern Russia and Ukraine, and contain the remains of women buried with weapons, armor, and horses. Their bones showed signs of battle injuries, and some were buried in the exact same style as elite male warriors. The Scythians, a nomadic people who lived around 2,500 years ago, were known to the Greeks and might have been the real-life inspiration for the Amazon myths. In fact, nearly 1/3 of all Scythian warrior graves found in these areas belonged to women. If you've ever seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I surely hope you have, you probably remember Tanis as the city where the Ark of the Covenant was supposedly buried. In the movie, it's this mythical sand-swallowed place full of curses and lost treasures. But what most people don't realize is that Tanis was real, and what archaeologists found there was just as wild as the legend. Found in the Nile Delta, Tanis was an actual ancient Egyptian city, once the capital of the 21st and 22nd dynasties. For a long time, people thought it was just another pile of ruins. Nothing special really, but in the 1930s, French archaeologist Pierre Montet started digging and came across something incredible. Royal tombs that hadn't been touched by looters. That's almost unheard of in Egypt. Inside these tombs were solid silver coins, gold masks, and jewelry that rivaled what was found in Tut's tomb even. Montet even found inscriptions and relics that referenced powerful priest kings and mysterious religious practices. It was the kind of treasure haul that made people wonder if those old stories about lost cities full of sacred artifacts might have had some truth to them after all. Now, no, they didn't find the actual Ark of the Covenant in Tanis, but the fact that the city was real, lost for centuries, and hiding all these untouched treasures, that was pretty cool. So there's this ancient scroll that lists every ruler in history, kings, dynasties, battles, floods, but half of it reads like pure science fiction. It's called the Sumerian King List, a strange cuneiform tablet found by archaeologists in Iraq. Copies of it date back over 4,000 years. The list starts with kings who supposedly ruled for thousands of years. One guy, Alulim, was said to have reigned for 28,800 years. Then there's a line that says the flood swept over, which sounds an awful lot like the biblical flood. After that, the reign lengths suddenly become more reasonable, and the names start matching up with known historical figures. So what's going on here? Some scholars think that the early parts of the list were myths meant to make the rulers seem more godlike, but the artifact does kind of blur the line between legend and record.
These weren't prayers. They were handwritten spells of destruction. Discovered at the sacred site of Acay Solace, modern-day Bath, England, were over 100 lead curse tablets thrown into a Roman temple spring. People would scratch angry, revenge-fueled messages onto these thin sheets, then toss them into the water in hopes that the gods would do their dirty work. One tablet reads, "To the god Solace, I give the person who has stolen my cloak. May he be unable to sleep or eat until it is returned." Others weren't as tame. Some asked for their enemies to be blinded or driven insane. What's even more chilling? Many were written backward or in mirrored Latin, a common method of dark magic to confuse spirits into obeying without question. These weren't petty squabbles. These were the dark side of divine justice in ancient Rome. They didn't just die in chains. They were buried in them. When a Roman-era cemetery was unearthed in York, England, archaeologists expected the usual: burial urns, organized tombs, and respectful interments. What they found instead was horrifying. Over 80 skeletons, many buried face down, some missing limbs or skulls, and at least 11 of them still shackled at the ankles with heavy iron restraints. These weren't soldiers or heroes. They were criminals, slaves, or outcasts, cast into the ground as if their punishment had to follow them into death. Some showed signs of trauma, others evidence of decapitation suggesting violent ends. Even stranger, the shackles appeared custom forged for human wrists and ankles, meaning someone deliberately designed these for long-term suffering. It is a brutal reminder that Rome's justice didn't end with death. A hand severed not by violence, but by design. While excavating the Roman fort at Vindolanda near Hadrian's Wall, archaeologists found what at first looked like a piece of scrap metal, but upon cleaning it, it revealed itself as a perfect bronze replica of a human hand, life-sized, eerily detailed, and buried deliberately beneath the threshold of a shrine to Jupiter Dolichenes, a god of war and thunder worshipped by Roman soldiers. This wasn't some innocent offering. Scholars believe it may have played a role in blood rituals or protective ceremonies. The way it was buried, facing upward, palm outstretched, suggests a symbolic gesture, possibly welcoming or warding off spirits. Whether it represented sacrifice or protection, the hand's presence still puzzles experts, and many believe it had a far darker function than we'll ever know. Beautiful on the outside, deadly on the inside. Buried in the ash of Mount Vesuvius's wrath, archaeologists exploring Pompeii uncovered a deceptively elegant gold ring, but inside the band was a tiny hollow compartment, perfect for storing poison. These so-called venom rings were often used by political assassins or desperate lovers, allowing the wearer to discreetly drop toxins into drinks or food with a subtle flick of the hand. The fact that this ring survived the catastrophic eruption is eerie enough, but the real question is, who wore it? Was it ever used? Or did its owner plan something that nature interrupted? Either way, it's a chilling reminder that beneath the empire's glamour, betrayal could literally be worn on your finger. Imagine being forced to wear your own ransom note. Among the ruins of ancient Rome, archaeologists found an iron slave collar with an inscription that reads, "I have run away. Hold me. When you return me to my master Zoninus, you will receive a gold coin." It's like a twisted version of a dog tag, except it was worn by a human being, possibly for their entire life. The collar tells a heartbreaking story in just a couple sentences. Not only was the enslaved person expected to live with their captivity, but strangers were openly encouraged to treat them like property for a reward. The emotional and physical weight of that collar makes it one of the most personal and disturbing artifacts ever uncovered in Roman history. 30 skeletons, no records, and no mercy. Underneath the Basilica of St. John in Ephesus, Turkey, Roman-era ruins revealed a pit of bodies. At least 30 men, women piled on top of each other, some decapitated, others with shattered bones. What's bizarre is the lack of context. No tomb markers, no formal burial, no signs of mourning, just bodies hidden beneath sacred ground. Some scholars believe it was an act of religious persecution, others think it may have been a political purge or even a cultic mass execution. Whatever happened, it wasn't quick and it wasn't sanctioned. This haphazard way the bodies were dumped suggests someone wanted this event forgotten. Instead, it is now one of the most unnerving, unsolved Roman mysteries. In ancient Rome, even fame came with blood. Carved into the walls of Pompeii's amphitheater were inscriptions celebrating local gladiators, like a Roman version of fan accounts. One reads, "Salatius the Thracian makes the girls sigh." But alongside these adoring tributes are cruder images, depictions of savage wounds, mutilations, and even lists of kills. Some illustrations show men being impaled, others eaten alive by beasts. It's a window into the twisted entertainment of the time. These weren't just fights, they were bloodbaths, cheered on by thousands. And the fact that fans immortalized these moments in stone speaks volumes about the violence Rome celebrated. You could become a celebrity in the arena, but only if you died well. A nail through the skull says one thing: someone wanted you dead. In a quiet English village near Broughton, a Roman-era skull was uncovered with an iron nail driven directly through its head. It was the first physical evidence in Britain of a Roman crucifixion or ritual execution. The placement and force weren't random, it was a targeted strike. This suggests the Romans in Britain may have used more than just the cross. It was brutal, final, and likely meant to send a message. No records survive of who this person was, but the nail remains over 1,800 years later, a rusted and permanent reminder of just how cold Roman justice could be. A cult, a god, and a hidden corpse. In 2017, excavations in central Rome led to a surprise discovery beneath a commercial building. A Mithraeum, or temple to the mysterious god Mithras. These underground temples were the meeting place of a secretive male-only cult, but in this one, archaeologists found something that didn't belong. A skeleton carefully buried beneath the altar. There are no words of who this person was or why they were buried there, but it wasn't standard practice. Some speculate it was a priest buried in honor, others believe it could have been a human sacrifice, though such rites were never openly acknowledged in Mithraic tradition. Either way, the body was meant to remain hidden until now, I guess. They didn't bury the heads, they displayed them. Near the old Roman road in Suffolk, England, a mass grave was discovered filled with decapitated bodies, all neatly lined up, but with their skulls placed between their knees or beside their hands. Most were healthy adult males, showing signs of sudden, clean cuts to the neck. Experts believe this wasn't battlefield carnage, it was execution. But here is what is truly disturbing. The skulls were carefully repositioned, almost as if arranged for effect. Some even believe the positioning was ritualistic. Whether punishment, sacrifice, or display, the site has become known as the Decapitator's Field, a chilling testament to how the Roman Empire turned death into a public message. Ancient Rome wasn't just an empire of law and order, it was also an empire of control, punishment, and secrecy. These artifacts aren't just remnants of the past, they're evidence of lives lived in fear, of rituals performed in shadow, and of cruelty carried out with precision. The deeper we dig, the darker it gets. In our number 4 spot today, we are talking about the Kofun tombs. There is a place in Japan where clues to an entire era of power and dynasty remain sealed beneath grassy mounds the size of small towns, and no one is allowed to peek inside. These colossal Kofun tombs tombs built between the 3rd and 6th century CE often have that peculiar keyhole shape best appreciated by soaring overhead or clicking through satellite images. They're rumored to hold all kinds of precious loot and hints about early Japanese rulership. Rows of Haniwa clay guardians, finely crafted armor sets, and high-status luxuries that might rewrite what we know about how kingdoms formed. Yet, because government restrictions forbid extensive excavation, the story of who these elite leaders were and how they wrested control from their rivals is mostly locked inside hills of ancient Earth. Every new theory about their social structures, networks of alliances, or the birth of a unified state is just that. A guess. Archaeologists must wait, frustrated but fascinated, for the day when these mysterious tombs finally give up their secrets. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Chachapoya, or the Cloud Warriors. Living in the Andean cloud forests before Inca conquest, the Chachapoya built cliffside tombs and fortified towns. These elusive people once carved out homes and tombs on sheer cliff sides, leaving archaeologists baffled centuries later. The Chachapoya, often called the Cloud Warriors by Spanish chroniclers, didn't just build dramatic fortresses and burial sites, they left behind mummies with surprisingly light hair, challenging our assumptions about who they were and where they came from. Their skeletal remains tell us they were skilled engineers and hardy survivors of rugged landscapes, yet no one can say for sure what language they spoke or how they organized their society. Modern science has tried to crack the code. Genetic analysis points to a complex cultural blend, while isotopic data hints at unexpected diets and mobility, but no single piece of evidence ties their puzzle together. In our number 2 spot today, we are talking about the Paleolithic Venus figurines. One of history's biggest riddles can fit right into your palm. Tiny Venus figurines that date back tens of thousands of years, carved from stone, ivory, or bone, and scattered all over Ice Age Europe. Each piece features generously rounded hips, voluptuous bodies, and intricate details on some parts, while leaving others oddly blank, raising a heap of questions that no one has been able to answer. Were these creations prehistoric pinups, fertility charms meant to secure healthy offspring, symbolic depictions of the female form as a source of life, or something more mundane, like a how-to manual for expectant mothers? Without a single scrap of writing or an ancient voice to guide us, archaeologists are left with only the delicate curves and puzzling patterns to guess their purpose. And finally, to end off this list today, we are talking about the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Legends insist there were once lush terraces bursting with blooms and vines, a majestic oasis perched high above a dusty Mesopotamian landscape. But the so-called Hanging Gardens of Babylon refuse to surrender even a shred of physical proof. Ancient texts celebrate this marvel as one of humanity's greatest achievements, an extravagant man-made paradise commissioned by kings, watered by clever engineers, and visible for miles. Yet no excavations have ever revealed so much as a foundation stone to confirm it was anything more than a poetic fever dream. Some scholars suspect it might have been situated in a neighboring city, or even built on paper rather than soil. Others believe it may have existed but was swallowed up by the sands of time, or even misidentified in old records. With nothing concrete to point to, archaeologists are just left scratching their heads, wondering whether they're chasing after a glorious mirage that never actually took root in Babylon's ancient Earth.
And in the same part of the world, we also have Gavrinus, which sits on a small island off the coast of Brittany. Dates back to around 4200 BCE. From the outside, it looks like a grassy mound. Inside, it's something else entirely. I mean, look at these carvings. It's beautiful. It's a long stone passage that leads to a central chamber, and almost every stone along the way is covered in these carvings. There are spirals and zigzags and other repeated patterns that show up at other sites from the same time. Some of the stones used here were clearly taken from older monuments, which means people were reusing pieces that already held meaning. The passage lines up with the rising sun at certain times of the year, allowing light to travel straight into the chamber. Gavrinus wasn't a place people lived though. It was sealed most of the time, probably only open for specific events. which just makes all the effort they put into decorating these stones even more impressive. And now we head to Spain with the dolmen of Menga, built around 3750 BCE. It's a long stone chamber with a short passage leading inside, but the size of the stones, some of the roof slabs weigh close to 180 tons, making them some of the heaviest stones ever used in an ancient construction like this. Instead of pointing toward the sun or stars like many other sites though, Menga is aligned toward a nearby mountain, which feels deliberate, must have had some sort of spiritual meaning. Inside the chamber, the space is wide and tall, almost cave-like. The stones are so heavy that builders had to add supporting pillars inside just to keep the roof from collapsing. This Sora sits in northern Morocco. It doesn't get nearly the attention it deserves. It's a large stone circle made up of around 167 standing stones, surrounding a central mound of earth. The site dates between the 4th and 3rd century BCE, so it's younger than most of the other sites on the list, but still impressive in scale. One of the stones stands over 16 feet tall, much taller than the rest. Definitely feels like it was meant to be the main marker. The stones are spaced in a way that clearly defines an inside and an outside. As for what the inside was for, we don't really know. Very little digging has been done here, so most of what we have are guesses. What we do know is whoever built it put in a huge amount of effort. Near the ancient Roman ruins at Baalbek in Lebanon, there's a quarry with stone blocks. Some of these things weigh over 1,000 tons. One unfinished block is estimated at around 1,650 tons, making it one of the largest stones ever cut by humans. These blocks were meant to be used in the massive temple complex right next to the quarry, and some of the slightly smaller stones from the same area were actually moved and built into the temple walls. Cutting stones that big is already difficult, but moving them, that's on a completely different level. Even with modern equipment, lifting and transporting something that heavy would not be simple. Yet some of the stones were clearly intended to be moved, and these things are clean and straight. They clearly knew what they were doing. What nobody knows for sure is why they stopped. Maybe the project got scrapped, or maybe they finally hit a limit. These things were just too heavy and had to be left behind. And Stonehenge didn't start as the stone circle people picture today. The first work there began around 3000 BCE, and changes kept happening for hundreds of years. That means generation after generation kept coming back to the same spot, even though they had no written language to pass instructions down. The largest stones weigh about 25 tons, and they were dragged from miles away. Some of the smaller stones came from Wales, which is over 150 miles from the site. Moving them would have taken serious planning and cooperation, especially without metal tools or wheels. The stones are lined up with the sun in a very specific way. On the longest and shortest days of the year, the sun rises or sets right where the stones are pointing. That kind of accuracy doesn't happen by accident, of course. Clearly, they were paying close attention to the sky over long periods of time. Stonehenge also wasn't alone. The land around it is full of burial mounds and pathways, so this area was important long before the stones came to be. Nobody knows exactly what Stonehenge was for, but it clearly mattered enough for people to keep working on it for hundreds and hundreds of years.